Delay. I can start now? All right. Calling to order the special board meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District. And we have a determination of quorum, Mr. General Manager.
Director Scott Houston.
Here.
Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray. Director Harold Williams. Here. President Debbie Alvarez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And do we have any public comments today?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to make public comment, now would be the time to do so. If you're joining us virtually, you can please indicate your desire to speak by raising your virtual hand. We will call on you. President Alvarez, I do not see any requests for public comment.
All right, thank you. Then we will move to the next item, which is presentations. And today we have a presentation of the MWD Climate Adaptation Master Plan. And we have the current chair of the MWD board and the general manager with us. So, Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, President Alvarez, it is a great honor to welcome our guests here today. We do have the Metropolitan Water District Chairman, Mr. Adon Ortega, returning to the Evergreen Little Water Recycling Facility after helping open it previously. We also have the General Manager, Adele Hodge-Khalil, as well as the Assistant General Manager, Kevin Covey. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our Metropolitan Water District Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager and President Alvarez. Thank you for having us here. It is an honor, and it's great to be home. I spent countless hours in this building and throughout the service area of West Basin, and it's always kind of like riding a bike. You know, you never learn, you never forget, you know, how to ride it, and certainly I feel at home here at West Basin. It's a wonderful experience that I had, and a lot of my career is based on what I learned here. I want to thank your representatives on the MWD board, Mr. President, as our director, as well as Chair Emeritus Gloria Gray, for your contributions for the passage of our two-year budget that begins the transformation of Metropolitan to one that's very equipped to deal effectively with climate change. Chair Gray, thank you. So this visit comes at a time when Metropolitan and other member agencies face enormous pressure to reduce our reliance on imported water, beginning with the Colorado River. On the Colorado, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation expects us to produce almost real-time results, showing in the form of higher lake elevation levels at Lake Mead. In the current water year, we left over 450,000 acre-feet of water at Lake Mead through investments in conservation and supply offsets. Last year, we left over 600,000 acre-feet to help the lake's elevation levels, in due part because of our efforts and those of our partners in California. Levels at Lake Mead today are equivalent to those in 2021 before the current crisis was triggered. In fact, we have maximized the accumulated storage at Lake Mead with 1.7 million acre-feet of water, about 12 feet of the lake's elevation. And that's thanks to many of the efforts that you've done here at West Basin in offsetting demands on imported water. The region is really pulled together. These investments on the Colorado are funded in large measure by federal grants through the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. As I said, conservation achieved through these programs is adding to our storage available during droughts, as also more water is also becoming available for storage because of the steeply declining water demands. The paradox is that of this is that, as you know, it represents less available revenue from water sales. Metropolitan's board has taken initial steps to address this paradox through the newly adopted two-year budget. In August, we will be increasing the ad valorem tax while keeping volumetric rate increases in the single digits on average. We realize that there are inequities to resolve in our system, such as the treatment surcharge. That's why we are accelerating the planning process for a new business model that is part of our climate adaptation master planning process known as Camp for Water. So please don't get me wrong, we're not fixing a failure, but shifting to address climate adaptation. It demonstrates that the last 25-year planning horizon saw real integrated resources planning with an emphasis on local projects and conservation, and that has worked. Many of you know Deborah Mann, the former COO at Metropolitan, and my former colleague. When planning conservation programs early in the 2000s, she would often challenge me to quantify the return on investment from conservation. It's taken me 24 years to answer her question outside the abstract, but here it is. The return on investment in conservation and local projects is 2.4 million acre-feet of storage out of 3.4 million acre-feet in total. In various reservoir and groundwater storage accounts, it's worth approximately $3 billion. And I want to go out of my way to note that this dynamic was first told to us in 2019 when Chairwoman Gray did a workshop at the Huntington Hotel in Pasadena, and the general manager reported to us at that time that about, I mean, it was an interesting figure, it was between 700,000 and 1 million acre-feet at that point that was in storage because of reduced demand. So we're really building on the shoulders of what came before. Because of good weather and conservation, we are currently in storage conditions with only a 30% allocation. Imagine what that means. In 2022, we had a crisis because we had a 0% allocation on the State Water Project. And that was at a time when we believed that the worst case scenario would be a 20% allocation. And so it really points to the dynamics of climate change. Last year, for example, with over 100% state allocation, we ran out of storage capacity in our system, prompting the need to increase future groundwater storage opportunities. So the time has come to ask, where will we store all the water being conserved, as well as the water that we get when we have good hydrological conditions? In fact, it is a paradox of our time that in 2022, we faced this crisis in portions of metropolitan service area, because we could not move water from Diamond Valley Lake to the northern reaches of our service area. There are other inequities that have resulted from the past, but those are based on assumptions that we must now update. Turning to the Bay Delta, as we consider more investments under Camp for Water to shore up levees and restore its environment, here are some factors we need to consider. As I stated, we need investments in projects that will yield fast results. The lawsuits in the Delta over Delta conveyance, the Water Quality Control Plan, and the voluntary agreements can take decades to resolve. And I think some of you might relate. Many of you have met Barbara Barragan with Restore the Delta. I met with her a little over a month ago, and she heavily insinuated that they're not all that worried about Delta conveyance. They believe that the 9 lawsuits that have been entered will gum up the gears for approval of that project, you know, for a long time. And what she indicated is that they're turning their attention to the voluntary agreement. What does that mean? It means they're going for the jugular, because the voluntary agreement will facilitate our water shipments through the Delta, which is supposedly something that everybody wants to do, but here we are. So what can we do besides wait? Agencies in the Central Valley, some which rely on the San Joaquin River that were once hesitant to involve metropolitan and groundwater projects, are now asking us to consider those very investments as a hedge against subsidence from groundwater as the Sustainable Groundwater Act goes into enforcement. Can these provide opportunities south of the Bay Delta as we weigh the risk of more delay and impasse in the Delta? Could it be that we can help save portions of the Central Valley from more subsidence before we can do our part to save the Delta? This is a long way of saying that in the present, the issues related to the Colorado River, the Bay Delta, and local supplies are all interwoven like never before. The goal of Camp for Water is to unite and fortify Southern California in this changed environment by strategically integrating with our member agencies like never before. And I've taken, you know, some dramatic steps in that direction. For example, we have a member agency manager sit with the board every month, and, you know, I work with the general manager to make sure that the member agency managers are integrated into Camp for Water as part of the task force. So climate change is challenging us and our water systems even sooner than our modeling projected. We must act now to adapt, to make smart, effective investments in new water supply strategies, storage, and more ways to move water, as well as water consumption and sales revenue are steeply declining. The test of our time is whether the financial challenges and measure of regional equity across Southern California with the changed climate will strengthen us or leave us each member agency on its own. Now I'd like to turn this over to Adel Haji Khalil, our general manager, to add to this equation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. It's great to see you and great to be at the great West Basin facility here at the Little. President Alvarez, thank you for having us. Appreciate it, and appreciate your leadership in Metropolitan as one of the two representatives of West Basin on the board. And you and I worked closely before in the past, really changing how we manage water, whether it's stormwater and the things that we've done together. Thank you for your leadership now and helping us. Chair Emeritus, great. Thank you always for your leadership, and working with you was an honor to the work that you have done. And I know how much you care for the community, and you really helped change the game when it came to equity, diversity, inclusion, workforce development, equity infrastructure. We signed the agreement to ensure that we are helping small businesses enter into the workforce. And actually, last week, we received the African American Chamber of Commerce Award for Utility of the Year. And I think a lot of it is because of the work that you have left when you were as a chair. So thank you for your leadership. This is an amazing opportunity, but I know each one of you from the board played a huge role. Vice Chair Williams, thank you for your service in Metropolitan. We appreciate everything you've done, what you continue to do. Secretary Deere, I know how much you and your family care for the community and your leadership in the community. And immediate past Chair Houston, thank you. I know how much you care about community conservation messaging, and we need to continue doing it together in a better job because we need to communicate with our community. So thank you. And I love seeing the rain barrels outside. I always love seeing those. I want to just acknowledge your General Manager, EJ Caldwell. Thank you, EJ, for your leadership. You're very collaborative. You're very supportive. Last week, the chair talked about representation by the GM at the Camp for Water Task Force, the Climate Adaptation Task Force. But also I've convened, although we have a regular member agency managers meeting once a month before the board meeting, but that's a different discussion. A lot of people attend. I've created a meeting only for the 26 general managers and I. We had a meeting last Thursday, where we have candid discussion. And I use that as, in a way, my advisory council. We have open discussion, making sure that we are doing what we need to do to move us forward. And I appreciated that. And AJ has been a great voice in that discussion, and I appreciated you and the work you do every single day. Thank you. Metropolitan goal and mission is ensuring safe, reliable water for everyone with no one left behind. And that's, I think the chair talked about it. If you do it alone, if you have to build resiliency alone, it's going to be costly and difficult. But our job, what created Metropolitan 100 years ago, was the need for a co-op. And now it's more needed than ever. This co-op for the next 100 years and the life of Metropolitan is about a co-op. Is how we can build the resiliency together, not alone, because I feel for a long time everybody's trying to do their own thing, and I think you're leaders in resiliency. I see it behind the president, water reliability at work, recycling, conservation, the work you've done, but we need to do it together. And really what we need to do is, how can we serve the 19 million people we have and the businesses we have? How can we balance demand and supply? In some areas in our region, we may have more supply than demand. Maybe there's a way we can move things instead of reinventing the wheel. And that's really what the Climate Adaptation Master Planning is doing, is looking at how we can adapt to the changing climate, which we know is upon us. We know it's here. We've seen it, and it's going to come back again. And we're seeing wet years right now, and we saw dry years before. So this Climate Adaptation Master Plan is looking at what we need to do. What is the approach that we have to do to build the resiliency? So when we turn the faucet, we have water for our communities. We need to continue conserving. Conservation is a way of life. But I think the new way of saying is, how can we do it in a way that allows for affordability, recognizes conservation, that you're not being penalized for conservation. And I want to tell the public, actually, because of conservation, the chair hit it right on, is out of the 3.4 million acre feet we have in storage, record storage, and the lowest amount of water use in our history. The water we're using today is the same water we used 50 years ago. I would repeat, the same water we're using today is the water we used 50 years ago. Our imported water is at 1.2 million acre feet of water this year, the lowest ever. Half of the water is being sourced locally here because of efforts like your efforts. But what we need to do is how we move forward. And that's why we need to develop a new business plan, a new business model to allow us to invest in resiliency and to move us forward. And that resiliency is about finding how we move water across our system, how we can capture wet water, protect our interests across the imported water system. But when we have wet years like we had last year and this year, we're able to move the water in the system and put it away, whether it's in in-basin storage, whether it's in used storage like we did in Antelope Valley Kern last year, invested $200 million in a storage at 300,000 acre feet equivalent to Lake Cascade underground in a partnership, Antelope Valley Kern. We're looking at ways to improve the conveyance and having a system that can move water in different directions. We are actually moving forward on a Sepulveda feeder upgrade to move water from the central pool area all the way to the west side and move water back when we have it. And that only can happen when we're working together and leveraging our resources. It's not, we need to find ways to build on the successes and doing it. And recycled water is a great component. You've led the way in recycled water, and under your leadership, we've convened 11 agencies that we meet regularly on how we can help leverage our recycled water work around this area, especially around Carson and the Pure Water Project. I know Mayor Holmes and I know Chair Emeritus Gray, remember her, she really wanted to ensure that we have the community is left in a better place. And so we've had a lot of workshops with the community. We've had two networks. We're inviting subcontractors. We did actually a workforce development work. And I think to me is how can we phase pure water in a way that can help offset and remove some of the imported water demand, but also build on the successes you've done here. Because we need to leverage that. And that's the discussion we're having with the 11 agencies and the discussion about moving forward with Devin and his team on pure water, how we're moving it with the board, and a discussion about phasing and all the discussion that I know President Alvarez, you're really interested in. But we have to do the changes. Yesterday, the chair and I were in Parker, Arizona, celebrating an agreement between the Creek tribes and the state of Arizona and the federal government on finally having a way to realize the water rights of the tribes and helping their community. And I know the chairwoman of the Creek tribe said, our goal is to ensure that we are working together for the health of the river, and the health of our communities. And that's really what we're doing. So we're continuing the dialogue with our partners along the Colorado River because we know we faced a huge issue. I mean, we were coming down to crash on the Colorado River. Nature threw us a lifeline, and we are working hard on conserving and doing the work we need to do. We offered cuts from California, and we actually have an agreement between now and 2026 using the Inflation Reduction Act funding to augment the work we need to do. But I think the biggest thing is the post-2026 guidelines that we have to agree to that will take us into the future. The good news is we are working together, Arizona, Nevada, and California, and the entire California contractors and water users are united. Ag, environment, urban are together. And we're working together to ensure we stand strong, but also with Arizona and Nevada. What we're saying is we're willing to we submitted an offer, the proposal we submitted basically said we're committed to reducing our use by the structural deficit, 1.5 million acre feet a year. However, beyond that, as a result of the changing climate, we all have to share. Nobody has the right to wastewater, even if you have the water rights to it. And that's the message we're sending. And we're asking everyone to conserve. And I think, to me, it's going to be great. Also, we've applied for a lot of grants. Last year, $200 million in grants. And this year, we have an application with the Bureau of Reclamation that we're hoping to get a announcement soon for $420 million. The big thing about this agreement, it's about conservation, about new local water supply, working with our 26 member agencies, we actually crafted the proposal. But 40% of that funding is gonna go to underserved communities. This is a way to really get back to the community and making sure everyone is considered and no one is left behind. It's gonna be a game changer. It's gonna be a huge game changer, and the Board of Metropolitan and your member agencies have really stepped up to show that we wanna make sure that nobody is left behind, and this will be a great example of how we do it. If you are in, we visit the city of Compton, and if the city of Compton's wells are protected, the groundwater basins are protected, we're all protected because they're not gonna get into imported water. And the rates are not gonna go up because they're using imported water. We also have to make sure that we are helping people like San Fernando and the commitment they have. We are working really hard to ensure communities in LA, in West Basin, and other communities that cannot afford to apply and get a rebate, can we do a direct install application? I know, Dr. Houston, you are really big on this messaging and conservation, so thank you for the work and the leadership you have done. Yesterday, and I'm trying to figure out if Wednesday we had the workshop, or Wednesday, we had the Climate Adaptation Master Plan workshop, and it was a one-year report from the staff. And I think we have evaluated criteria, we have some really time-bound metrics to shoot for, and now what we need to do is put meat on the bone, how we achieve those things. We're gonna have a menu of projects, menu of policies, and it's gonna be adaptive management, where we're not gonna spend money on everything, but we're gonna prioritize it based on our risk management. And that's really, it's a new way of planning in Metropolitan, but it's gonna really get us to a place where we're actually looking ahead, planning ahead, but only pulling the trigger when we need it. And that's a big change. Tied to that is the new business model, which we kicked off last Wednesday, where we're gonna talk about how we can ensure that we're rewarding conservation, allowing for exchange, finding the investments that we have to do to build resiliency, where everybody shares in resiliency, but you still are paying for the water you're using. But you're not just covering the cost of the entire system maintenance and upgrade by the people buying water. So we're trying to reverse that, and I think everybody's looking at us as really changing the game in terms of how we manage and build resiliency into the system. So we need to really reinvent ourselves, transform ourselves when it comes to water planning, but also as to how we pay for it. Conservation, a lot of people ask the question is should we continue conserving? The answer is yes. The board said, yes, we need to conserve. $100 million have been invested. But I think the chair mentioned it a little bit, but for the first time ever, we actually quantified how much of the 3.4 million acre feet, which is, to put it in context, 3.4 million acre feet of storage that we have right now, record, equivalent to 3 years of imported water. 3 years of imported water we have in storage. And out of that, it's about over 2 million acre feet is from conservation. So as part of this budget, and as we developed this budget that the board approved, we wanted to ensure cuts. We actually did cost controls, but also we were able to monetize some of the storage we have, and to the equivalent of about $120 million in 2 years, by us monetizing some of the storage we have. And that's something we're working really hard right now to find the agreements to do, and hopefully soon we'll get the agreements to the board to realize that funding. But really, it's having conservation pay for conservation, which is a new idea, which I think is really sending the message back to our ratepayers that your conservation is helping us move us forward, and we need to continue doing it. So this is really a change, a game changer, and hopefully we can do even more as we get the funding from the Inflation Reduction Act to do direct install and allowing everybody to have the funding. And also we've announced adding trees to our turf replacement program. Now, everyone who takes advantage of replacing turf can take advantage of having 5 trees added to their lawn by getting $500 in rebate. And that trees provide shade, shelter, good for the environment. Also, it captures water. It's a great water capture, and these are great for everyone. So we ask everyone to really reach out and take advantage of these rebates, and we'll work with you and our team to ensure that that's accessible. to me, it's exciting times. The chair talked about 10 years ago, we talked about in the Colorado, in the state water project, at 75% allocation, we were in balance, and we can go to storage. Today, at 30% allocation, we're in balance, and we can move into storage. Last week, the Department of Water Resources announced we're at 40%. That means we're moving now water and storing it. That tells you, because of the work of our communities, we are actually building resiliency. We're not dependent on the imported water. And we're taking advantage of it when we have it, but we're not dependent on it. And we need to do more. The efforts are not done. And it takes us all to do it. So I see Metropolitan is the umbrella to bring us together, but also the net to make sure no one is left behind. And that's the future for all of us. And you are part of it. You are leaders. I know the chair, the emeritus, President Alvarez, and the board members here, each one of you are really big champions for the community and the work we're doing. And you have done an amazing job here at West Basin. I want to continue working and building this across the board. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. I know Devin and I are working really closely on many of the programs and the issues. And I don't know if you had anything, Devin, or you were just open for questions.
I think you guys have done a fantastic job. Here to support if you have any questions.
Well, we just described the very definition of resilience and adaptation. Resilience is not only the act of avoiding mistakes, it's gained by surviving setbacks, learning lessons from them, and coming out stronger. Metropolitan and our member agencies have time and time again proven this fact, and we are now stronger for it and positioned to avoid the shortcomings that we faced in 2022. With climate change, humanity as a whole has been forced to admit what probably farmers have always known, that nature has the final word, and that we have to learn to listen to it better. And that is our first step to adaptation. So Camp for Water is aimed at the certainty of uncertainty and preparing for whatever nature brings us. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming in today and all of the comments that you've made, and open it up to board members if you have any questions. Director Deere?
Yes, thank you very much. You really have brought a lot of information to us about a very complicated, complex problem.
Wasn't around here 10 years ago. Back many of us didn't foresee the problems we have today. And I commend you for your efforts, all of you. There was an early mention in your comments about a $400 million grant. Where is that coming from? What's it going to be for?
The $420 million under the Inflation Reduction Act, that was a program that was put in place to help respond to the shortage in the Colorado River and Lake Mead. It's coming from the federal government under the Bureau of Reclamation. We applied, actually, thanks to our senators and our Congresswoman Napolitano, last-minute negotiations. We're able to ensure that part of that funding goes to urban communities, not just ag communities. Although we support ag communities, we wanted to be a part of that discussion. So we're able to work on a weekend. I remember it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, working hard on the phones, calling, and making sure our senators and God bless her heart, Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla and their teams and Congresswoman Napolitano and others helped us and with the administration to ensure that language is included. So right now, that money is helping offset our use in the Colorado River. So if we take that money, we need to implement programs, including conservation, replacing turf with California-friendly, local water resource programs. So if you are doing protecting groundwater basins, protecting your wells so you're not using imported water, recycling water, that's going to be part of it. Storage, leaky pipes, all these things going to be in place. And part of it's 42%. 40% is going to underserved communities. So it's going to help us. And we need to come up with the water that we save. We'll put it back in Lake Mead as part of that augmenting and helping clear up the shortage in Lake Mead. So we're very optimistic that we will get it soon, hopefully between now and the end of the month, and look forward to working with our partners on how we disperse this and how we ensure that everybody has a chance to get that investment that they need to do the right thing and move us forward.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Director.
What I've heard here, really, just have a good feeling. And one of them is that, we have embraced trees. And we're not getting rid of trees to save sidewalks. And I say that because, when I was growing up, one of the jobs I had as a kid was, making up leaves. I used to make quite a bit of money raking up. Some people didn't like raking up leaves, and they used everything they could to get cities to take out trees. See, I can name a couple cities. As I grew up, I became a public works director, and I worked for some cities who I could take you right now 2 blocks to show you where there are no trees. They were removed not because they were tearing up sidewalks, they were causing people to have. True story. Cities are writing this. But anyway, I'm so glad that now, you had mentioned that there were a program where if you put in 5 trees, there was something you got. That, what was that again?
What it is, it's $100 for every tree, up to 5 trees when you tear out your lawn. And I have to share with you, the idea came from Cindy Montañez, who's a city council member in San Fernando, but she was also the executive director at Tree People. And a lot of the early work that Tree People did was here in West Basin. Like the rain barrel work that they did, they also did rooftop conservation, where they were trying to collect water from rooftops. All that happened in West Basin. So when the city of San Fernando was drawing up its drought resolution, she said, well, we can't just keep tearing out lawns and killing the trees. You got to be affirmative and proactive. And so, I think Metropolitan stepped up and said, yeah, we agree, we got to preserve the canopy. So thank you, Director Williams, for that voice of support.
And I know during my days just before I moved to Metropolitan, actually, Mayor Garcetti at the time asked me to come in and putting climate resiliency into the street program. And one of the things that we stopped actually is taking trees down. And we found other ways to fix it. But the other one we did is tree inventory. And the last thing we did before I left was creating using data to help identify the heat exposure and where trees are, tree canopy, and also where people walk. And we were able to align the use of walking to schools or to buses, et cetera, with the heat index, and identified areas that we had to do multiple things. And some of the projects that we actually developed there is cool pavement, to cool the pavement combined with trees to create canopy. And that was part of an equity plan and investment. And I'm very proud that we were able to identify many of these programs, whether it's in South LA, East LA, or Northeast LA, all these areas that really were not being looked at. The data was not being used to help implement. And I agree with you 100%. Trees are part of our stormwater capture, part of our reducing flooding. It helps improve the health of the environment, and that's why I believe, I think yesterday we had a meeting with Tree People, and we're building a partnership with them again and finding ways that we can collaborate on managing water through trees and through investment. So great, thank you for your leadership in that one.
Any other comments or?
I'll go very briefly. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for all of you being here, and I know you've been making the rounds with member agencies. That's greatly appreciated, and also it is a Saturday, so we thank you for that as well, gentlemen. I really don't have questions, more just some comments, and obviously most are all in agreement with everything I think Metropolitan's done. As you were speaking earlier, you mentioned we're a co-op, which we are, and so we do all have to work together, and the average person in the region does not understand how most of this works. So yet it's incumbent upon the member agencies, and some of us are like a mini co-op with our, communities that are far flung. But at the end of the day, we're all tied at the hip, if you will, as the 19 million Californians are part of metropolitan. So everyone is dependent upon the decisions we make, whether it's the local, member agencies, local cities that are direct members, and of course, the Metropolitan Board of Directors and the management. So, no matter, what we do here, I mean, that is purely for the future of our region and our people, and of course, our businesses. I think that we always have to remember that, which I know you do, but we always just have to pinch ourselves and think that, well, not everybody's paying attention to what we do. It drives everything, quite frankly. And I will say, I've been on the board for 10 years now, and we've gone through 2 historic droughts. And actually, ironically, I was listening to something on the radio yesterday, and there was a gentleman talking about a book or something, and he actually said the same thing. We've been through 2 historic droughts. I'm like, good, he's got the talking points. But for what it's worth, it really has changed the way we think about things. And so, one of you had mentioned how we all were looking at different projects, and I remember that's how it was. I think the future is we've got to be cooperative. We have to make sure we're not going to have stranded assets. This truly is a team effort, and West Basin's been doing that too, with, looking at our work with WRD, Metropolitan, with Los Angeles, next door. We have no choice but to do that. I'll say also thank you for the concept of leaving one behind. As I was talking about this too, West Basin, we have some of the most wealthy communities, but we also have some of the most underserved communities in our region. And this board and our staff have been really cognizant of that over the years. And so I always really applaud our own efforts when we think about all the communities we serve, that we don't just focus on the ones that have more. As a matter of fact, when we saw that we weren't getting the participation rates, let's say with turf removal, some of those, we really rescoped that. And we looked at new programming like our Grass Replacement Plus program. I think another item or two I just want to mention, because some of us were just in DC before last, and we're talking to water reuse and some of the other folks, and it's so amazing right now. The country as a whole, we're facing different challenges. And in parts of the country you would not have thought of drought or recycled water, they're looking at that now, right? Even in Kansas, they're looking at these concepts. But California always has been a leader. We have to continue to do our part, but we are really experiencing a true transition, and yet water is really one of the most critical components. So everything that we do and what you all are doing, especially with the Colorado River, is so important going forward. I think 2 other thoughts, and one is, speaking of Tree People, I know they've done some wonderful work, but I think let's not forget, people are really interested in cisterns and some of the larger storage options. As a matter of fact, a gentleman asked me about that the other day, and we need to look at how do we continue to let people know that that's an option, especially like in new build, or if someone, yes, they might have a lower means and they want to put that in the property. So, and I know that, again, Tree People was really instrumental in some of that in the past. So I think we should consider that again. And lastly, at the end of the day, I mean, the elected folks, the appointed folks, and yes, our executive management, we all do a lot of the decision making and try and set the vision, but it is our staff. The staff are the ones that really make all this happen. So we have to give all of our staffs a lot of credit for, we set the tone and the policy, but they're the ones who helped us achieve these amazing numbers. And so that's not lost on me, and I know it's not lost on everybody else, but I really want to say thanks to all the staff who really, truly make this happen, so we can do the good work on it. Again, thank you, all 3 of you, for being here today. Appreciate it.
They actually do it for the first time since COVID, a picnic for the entire Mets family. We'll invite the member agencies and others. We just did I went Wednesday, I know we had a workshop on camp, but I went to the desert. We had a picnic for all the employees in the desert to recognize their work they're doing with their families. I think that's critical, ensuring the employees and staff are recognized for the work they're doing is essential. That's the foundation. Without a strong foundation, you can't build a building. So appreciate the comments.
First of all, I apologize for being late. Thank you so much for waiting. Thank you, Mr. President, and everyone here. It's good to see the chair and the general manager and the assistant general manager here. Director Houston mentioned that it's a great idea what you guys are doing, and I think it's great that you're going around to the member agencies, because we are a co-op, as he said, and we should hear from leadership, and you should hear from us. And, you know our story. We have a wonderful story. I mean, I think everybody realizes that what we do it well. We do it very well. We've been doing this for years, and we have a great general manager and board. So, it's just a couple of things I want to touch on. And one is the business model. I think, Adele, you mentioned it or talked about it briefly. Are we in the process of doing that, or what's kind of the time frame?
So we kicked it off last Wednesday. And we actually had a discussion with the member agency managers, Thursday. We're hoping it needs to be done before the next budget cycle. So I'm hoping to get something for discussion with the board between now and the end of the year. I'm pushing it hard we brought in experts, and we're gonna be working hard on getting that done. It'll be running in parallel with the climate adaptation master plan because of the urgency. So we may not have the needs we have for building resiliency. However, we're gonna estimate certain amount of money and develop the options to how we can collect money and all the stuff. So I would say between now and December, you should have a clear idea of the alternatives and the options.
One of the components would be basically portability, resiliency, those are the things that you'd be thinking about.
If I may add to that, sure, great. I think, there's several things that may happen in parallel. So for example, amongst our member agencies, there's inequities in service, like we had with the State Water Project exclusive areas. Those are gonna take some expense to resolve, and I think the staff has already made a lot of progress there. But I think there needs to be assurances. During your time as chair, we made the commitment as a board to make sure we were addressing those issues, and I think as we've traveled to the member agencies that were impacted, I think we're being told we've done good on it. But there's still some components that need to be done. The second one is no stranger to most of you, is the San Diego litigation. And I've asked Director Alvarez to be on the committee, and so that's another issue that we're gonna have to address that will also inform, I think, the ultimate business model. And then the final one has to do with the treatment surcharge. There's member agencies that, before either you or I were chair, were thinking that we needed to reconfigure the way that we assess that cost of service. And that's something that we're gonna have to resolve as well. And so I think those things are happening in parallel. You've got the business models, and then ultimately, we're gonna have, it's gonna impact how we assess rates and raise revenues.
But affordability is gonna be key to everything, I know.
Exactly.
And we did a presentation, I think, last week, and we gave the report on the 4 workshops that happened at the board on affordability and the anchors, how to do it, and how we reward people for conservation, but also making sure that we are collecting the revenue to invest in resiliency that benefits everyone. So I think your leadership there, and I think we need to continue focusing on that.
Thank you. The other thing, I know that, I think Adele or Don mentioned, the chair and the general manager mentioned, what we're doing in Carson. And I know that you've talked to the mayor about a training center there, which is absolutely wonderful. I'd like you to consider maybe a satellite training center in the city of Inglewood on this side of town, the South Bay area, if you will, right? Because workforce development, we've talked about it a lot, especially here around this table. We're interested in making sure that we do have a pipeline of folks coming in to the industry. So just thoughts.
So, yeah, and I think we are entering into an MOU with the city of Carson, but one of the things that the chair have asked me, and I've asked the team, to develop a comprehensive plan for workforce development and an overall strategy. for us to present to the board and ensure that that is included. So I know during the project labor agreement, at the time, I don't know, Chair, at the time you were involved, we partnered with the building trades and the labor and did a 35 resource centers. But that was critical for you at the time. I remember how it was critical. So we need to talk to them about how we can build on ensuring the connectivity between communities that we serve and the job centers. So I think we need to continue that dialogue.
Sure,
There's a lot of development in the South Bay area, right? And so that's what I'm asking you.
Especially in Inglewood.
Well,
Yeah, I didn't want to just, I didn't go with it. There's a lot of development.
May I add to that? There's, I think people underestimate the degree to which we do have a deficit in, finding qualified workers in the water industry. And it's operating at all levels, both at the operator level, but one of the startling, studies that I have, followed is large infrastructure. So, we've been talking about Delta Conveyance, and you've got high-speed rail going on at the same time. I've talked to some of the senior executives of leading engineering firms, and the truth is that if we were to have a project as massive as Delta Conveyance right now, we probably wouldn't be able to find all the engineers to get it going full throttle at the beginning. And it's getting even more difficult as the immigration issues have accelerated, and it's becoming difficult to even move people abroad. So, making investments, you have big universities and colleges within the range of Inglewood where, where we can be more strategic and open opportunities, STEM opportunities at all levels.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I only have a couple of comments.
Okay.
One, conservation. I'm a big, big believer in conservation. So I'm always glad to see not only the efforts here at West Basin in promoting conservation, but in Metropolitan's and Metropolitan's continuing commitment to conservation. To the point about the value of conservation and how much it's worth, it's great to quantify it in a couple of million acre feet of storage and then the value of that water. But I've always said any water conserved is the cheapest water you ever bought. The economist part of me always says, well, look at your marginal cost. Every ounce of conserved water is an ounce of water you did not have to produce. And to produce net new water costs us an awful lot of money. So it's not always how much money is bringing in immediately, but it is that avoided cost. That's the true value of conservation. And it's the right thing to do for the environment. And I think that the continued efforts in that direction will serve all of us well. And not just in Southern California, but throughout the United States. There's a lot of areas, as you mentioned, that are now facing droughts and water shortages that just are totally alien to that part of the world. The last thing is the business plan. I think that it is very important that Metropolitan's doing that. We have a similar challenge here at West Basin. Today is our second budget workshop, and we have some significant issues, in part driven by conservation. And that reduces the net number of revenues to keep water affordable and still do and provide all the services that we need to provide as a challenge. So I'm looking forward to working in that.
So President Alvarez, Deborah Mann never bought that argument. And the reason she didn't, there's an interesting person at Metropolitan, Tim Blair, he finally explained it to me, and he said, when you're at the margins doing conservation, it's kind of hard to attribute what is creating the savings, like within up to about 15%. Because it could be anything, like the slowdown in development or whatever, so you can't take credit for it. But the only thing you can take credit for is when you see the water in the reservoir. And we're seeing it in a big way. Well, actually, we started seeing it in 2019, and now we're seeing it in a big way. And in terms of its value in the business model, I think Adele mentioned it, we're now monetizing the conservation to pay for conservation. And that's, you know, before we would subsidize conservation and lose revenue. If we do this right, you know, this has implications for all kinds of things. So for example, I think it gives us, moral standing on the Bay Delta. You know, we've been saying for years that we are making a good faith effort. Well, here it is. We're saving water now with 30% allocation. Imagine that. And so I think it has ramifications in many ways, and I wholeheartedly agree with you.
All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it,
If you
your,
don't mind, Mr. President, if we can take a picture with,
oh,
it'd be great to
yes,
support if you don't
I
mind.
almost forgot about that. If
If
we could,
behind you, at the end,
right,
that's fine.
come forward.
That's it.
Okay.
Is there room?
There's room for you.
More efficient than having these two do their own.
How did you get your food?
Yeah.
Hey, who's the,
Probably the Chanel.
This is the last meeting of the year.
Another beautiful day.
It is.
Every day. Okay, we're back. So we have, today, on the action calendar, one item, which is the, consideration of participation in community outreach events. Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce that item, please?
Yes, thank you very much, President Alvarez. This item does, include three different parts, one of which would be a waiver of our 10 business day, rule for the, sponsorships. And then, of course, we do have two, specific, sponsorships to be considered. For this presentation, we do have Desiree Quintero, our Manager of Administration and Board Secretary.
Good morning, members of the board. Item 5A, consent can be found beginning on packet page 3. We have two sponsorship items being brought forward for your consideration. The first is the Palos Verdes Peninsula Chamber of Commerce's State of the Peninsula Breakfast. This event is being held on Wednesday, May 8th. The State of the Peninsula Breakfast will offer an informative presentation featuring the 4 mayors of the Palos Verdes Peninsula. The event will also include the installation of the Palos Verdes Peninsula Chamber of Commerce 2024 Board of Directors. Director Williams requests consideration for West Basin to sponsor the Palos Verdes Peninsula Chamber of Commerce's State of the Peninsula Breakfast event in the amount of $1,000, which would grant West Basin an advertisement promoting district awareness. West Basin has not previously sponsored this event. Additional information regarding this request is included in attachment A, which can be found on packet page 5. One thing to note, Administrative Code Section 2-1.306 requirement for sponsorship states that all expenditures require approval by a majority of the board at least 10 business days before the event. With the event being held on Wednesday, May 8th, this request does not meet that requirement. The board would have to provide a waiver of this requirement in order to consider sponsorship at this event. The second sponsorship for consideration is the City of Hawthorne's Mother's Day Brunch and Awards Ceremony, which will be held on Saturday, May 11th. The Mother's Day Brunch and Awards Ceremony will serve as an opportunity to show appreciation for all mothers and will honor 5 moms who have made a difference in the community. Director Deere and Director Gray request consideration for West Basin to sponsor the City of Hawthorne's Mother's Day Brunch and Awards Ceremony event in the amount of $1,000, which would grant West Basin an advertisement promoting district awareness. West Basin has not previously sponsored this event. Additional information regarding this request is included in attachment B, which can be found on packet page 10. Funds for the sponsorship of and participation in community outreach events are included in the fiscal year 2023-24 community outreach budget in the amount of $75,000. Approving participation in the event as requested in the amount proposed totaling $2,000 would leave a remaining budget of $5,600 as shown in attachment B, which can be found on packet page 15. With that, I would like to read the recommendation. 1, Director Williams recommends that the board consider A, providing a waiver of the 10 business day advance approval requirement, and B, approving sponsorship of the Palos Verdes Peninsula Chamber of Commerce's State of the Peninsula Breakfast event scheduled to be held on Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, in the amount of $1,000. And 2, Director Deere and Director Gray recommend that the board consider approving sponsorship of the City of Hawthorne's Mother's Day Brunch and Awards Ceremony event scheduled to be held on Saturday, May 11th, 2024, in the amount of $1,000.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move approval of item 5A1. The waiver of the 10 business days and approving of the first item of discussion.
One comment or question. Should we maybe split this a little bit and, first take the administrative portion, and that is, waiving the requirement, for the 10 business day advance approval?
We'd have to.
And then take the other 2 items, just.
It's in addition, but we can do your way if you want.
No, it's,
I'll move approval of the waiver for the 10 business days, approval as discussed.
That, all right, I'll second that. So that's just the first piece. That's what
right,
we're
and
doing. Is that what you want to do?
let's take a vote on that.
Director Scott Houston.
Yes.
Director Don Deere.
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray.
Yes.
Director Harold Williams.
Yes.
President
Okay, and now, there's the two items for approving the sponsorship,
No,
or, okay,
to take them separately. I'll move approval of item 5A1B, the approval of the Union Peninsula, Peninsula Breakfast.
okay, go ahead and take a vote on that.
Director Scott Houston.
Yes.
Director Don Deere.
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray.
Yes.
Director Harold Williams.
Yes.
Director President Desi Alvarez.
No,
I will go ahead and make a motion to approve item 5A, number 2, correct? That, the amount of $1,000 for the Mother's Day brunch, so with that, I'll make that motion.
Second.
take a vote.
Director Scott Houston.
Yes.
Director Don Deere.
Yes.
Director Gloria Gray.
Yes.
Director Harold Williams.
Yes.
President Desi Alvarez.
No. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of the action calendar, and we will move on to the information calendar, which is the, workshop regarding our fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. So, Mr. General Manager, would you please introduce that item?
Yes, President Alvarez, I'm happy to do so. First and foremost, as you can see from this room, I want to say thank you very much to our managers and supervisors for all their activity in relation to the information that you're about to receive. And I think leading this effort, it should be acknowledged that our Chief Financial Officer, Wendy Nakamura, has been leading this effort with all of our managers, as well as our finance staff, Allison, Tom, everybody. I want to say thank you very much for being here on Saturday and for everything that you've done as far as putting this great presentation together. If you could turn to packet page 18, you can see that we are here for our second of 2 budget workshops. And with that, I will hand it over to Wendy.
Wendy, before you get started, thank you very much. I know you've put a lot of effort, and the staff has put a lot of effort into this, and you guys have done an excellent job, so thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And good morning, Director, and everyone attending this meeting today. I want to start today's meeting with West Basin's mission, which is page 19 of the package. West Basin's mission is to provide a safe and reliable supply of high-quality water to the community we serve. So please turn to page 20. This is today's meeting agenda. We'll go over the budget workshop schedule. We will go over the recap, feedback from April 6th meeting. We will discuss FY 25 expenses and FY 25 water rates and our revenue. And also, we will be providing the options to the board for West Basin Reliability Service. Please turn to page 21. This is our current budget workshop schedule. On May 1st, we plan to have a customer workshop. On May 15th, we will have a discussion about our CIP and funding options with the board. On May 30th, we may have another meeting. If board prefer, we have another meeting.
And with that, Wendy, I would like to comment here. It's worth noting that I have been reaching out to each and every one of our individual retailers to discuss the process in which you're moving forward with the budget. They have been informed, and so far, everybody does expect to participate in that May 1st customer workshop. And I want to just also point out to staff, our retailers have been very grateful, I think, not just the information that they've been provided at the West Basin Water Association, but this is the earliest we've ever held a customer workshop to really get their input. So the feedback that I've been getting from our retailers has been extremely positive.
The next few slides are the recap feedback from April 6th meeting. Please turn to page 23. During the meeting on April 6th, we mentioned that there are challenges and opportunities for FY twenty-five budget. Our challenges are potable water, the decline in fiscal year twenty-three and twenty-four as the result of strong water conservation effort and increased groundwater pumping. Recycled water OM costs are increasing. We see big increase in chemical utilities. Current recycling water agreements are now covering the cost. Current net revenue after paying off debt service is not sufficient to cover the CIP project. Our aging infrastructure will require more repairs. Our opportunities are several major recycling water agreements will be renewed in the coming year. It will providing opportunity for West Basin to recover costs in the future. The cost of service study will be moving towards the completion. We discovered we did not collecting enough money from our customers to pay for Metropolitan RTS due to over budget the potable water sales in fiscal year 23 and 24. We plan to budget conservatively in fiscal year 25. Please turn to page 22. During April 6th meeting, we provided 4 options to the board. Those options are listed on the bottom of page 24. As you can see, we didn't propose. We provided 0%, 5%, 10%, and 50%. I also like to mention that our current reliability service charge is $275 per year. Please turn to page 25. The feedback from April 6th meetings are to update fiscal year 25 budget revenue by reducing the potable water sales from 82,000 acre-feet to 80,000 acre-feet. And also reducing WRD Dominguez Gap potable water sales from 2,500 to 1,800 acre-feet. West Basin budget revenue will reduce by $800,000 due to the change. The board had told us at April 6th meeting, West Basin reliability service charge possibly can be increased if it is needed to meet the West Basin's operation and service we provide. The board also asked us to cut the expenses. Staff already cut $2.5 million from April 6th meeting, and we will discuss that, the cut in the later slide. The board asked staff to provide more information about outstanding debt, to review the West Basin reserve policy, reserve cash balance, and then also providing information about debt coverage. Please turn to page 26. On page 26, we're providing the information about West Basin outstanding debt payment schedule and then the standby revenue. As you can see at the bottom of this page, we have a $271 million outstanding debt. The total standby revenue will providing $50 million to offset the debt. However, after the standby revenue ended fiscal year 2030, West Basin still have a $221 million debt that we need to pay. turn to page
If you could
27.
stop for just a second, Wendy, I just want to note that even with a standby charge, when it is available, it is not sufficient to cover the debt payment, about
Correct.
1/3 of the debt payment. And so the rest of that debt payment's coming out of, water sales.
Correct.
Thank you.
Please turn to page 27. At the last workshop, the board asked us to do more research about what would be the proper cash reserve for White Basin. Government Finance Officer Association recommends at a minimum regarding this, the size of the government, the agency should have more than 2 months of operation revenue as the cash reserve. Agency heavily rely on variable revenue, which is West Basin. We collected our potable and recycling water revenue based on the sales per acre. We will need a more reserve than the large government who is rely on the fixed revenue such as the property tax. Reserves will help to pay West Basin's emergency, anticipate, and unpredicted events such as inflation or economic downturn. West Basin's average 2 months revenue is 73.4 million. Our current cash reserve is 69.1 million. We are 4.3 million short. Please turn to page 28. The board also asked us to explain the debt coverage. The healthy debt coverage will providing cushion against unexpected revenue shortfall and the emergency expenses without jeopardizing the payment of the debt. Higher ratio of debt coverage also signals strong financial health for the agency and will lead to a lower borrowing rate and higher credit rating. A week after West Metropolitan District passing their budget, the rating agency immediately improving their bond rating from AA1 to AAA. That is because the investors had more confidence in Metropolitan. The higher debt coverage also allows for future investment in CIP and other business opportunities without West Basin needed to borrow more money. Please turn to page 29. The next 2 slides, I will present fiscal year 25 total budget expenses and total budgeted labor and the benefits. Staff from each department will take the lead presenting each department's budget. Please turn to page 30. As you can see at the bottom of page 30, West Basin, the total expenses is going to be 69.8 million for fiscal year 25. It is $3.4 million lower than we budgeted for fiscal year 24. I would also like to mention we already reduced the $2.5 million from April 6th budget workshop. The highlighted costs are the costs being reduced from April 6th budget. Please turn to page 31.
Ms. Britt,
Yes.
can I ask you to expand on those areas that are highlighted?
The staff from each department will give you more, detailed explanation when they're presenting their budget.
Okay, so we'll know more.
Yes.
Right. We're gonna go through each of the individual, categories that you see here. What we did is we placed those in red boxes. That's where we've been able to identify, reductions from the previous workshop. So we're continuing to work on this budget to refine those numbers. You can see here that we're, a little over $2.5 million, less than we presented to you on the, in
Right.
workshop one.
You'll expand on it later, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But also, since we're on this slide right now, I'd like to point out that I do take difference, with the presentation. When we're looking at the proposed budget of $49.9 million, almost 50 million, versus the adopted budget for 2024, in 2023-24, 52, we're showing savings. But the reality is that the proposed budget is more than we're spending this year. The projection for this year, for the first item, the recycled water cost is only gonna be 48.9 million. So when we're showing savings, it's kind of a interesting, interpretation, because in fact, we will be, budgeting to spend more money than we're currently spending on that particular, activity. So it's an interesting, way of looking at things. I like to look at things as how much did we spend and how much are we proposing to spend versus how much were we proposing to spend and then we modify, or how much did we think we were gonna spend and, how much we're proposing to spend. So it's just a difference of, viewpoint.
And President Alvarez, if I could just address that very briefly. Very similar to the approach that we're taking on projected sales. Staff is providing the board with a very conservative approach. And we're gonna continue, just like we did last year, and I thank you for noting that we're, below budget. Because we're watching every penny, we're looking at every program and trying to come under budget. But we need to take a conservative approach as far as our budget goes. So each of these categories, what we're looking at is the potential spending. If we were to drive that number down lower and lower, at some point, you're not gonna hit that mark, and you're gonna be over budget. And the way we do our rates, with our volumetric rates, if we go over, we would be under collecting, as you know.
I agree with everything you said. The difference is that the proposed budget is fine, okay? It should be conservative. But when you're looking at the variance should be between the proposed budget, in my opinion, proposed budget, and the actual expenditure. Now, for what's anticipated is, and you're to be congratulated for the savings, we agree, and I'll be the first one to say that's fantastic, and we needed that this year, that we needed to watch every penny. And we'll continue to have to be that way in the future. Just that we should be conservative, but when we're looking at the variance should be over what we're actually spending. Just a difference of opinion, kind of like, how do you price the cost of conserved water? Is it the marginal cost of replacing that water, or is it some other mechanism to monetize conservation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Please turn to page 14. Oh, the, 31, sorry. So page 31 shows West Basin total budget labor and benefits is going to be $11 million for fiscal year 25. We have a 52 full-time employees, same as fiscal year 24. You will see throughout the, later presentations, the $11 million labor benefits will be allocated to each operating program, such as recycling, public information, water resources, conservation, based on the number of employees will be participating in those programs. I pose for any questions?
Yeah, do we have 50 employees now? You're anticipating two, that,
That is correct.
Just backing up for a second clarification. Are you looking for input as to what we're gonna be supporting, or you just, this is a presentation because, as we go through each one of these categories, at what point are we gonna say, that there's support for doing that, or there isn't support for doing that?
We greatly appreciate any and all input as we go through this presentation. Obviously, at the conclusion of the report, we could also collect some feedback where we see kind of that, and you saw that in the feedback from the, and recap of the original meeting. When we hear kind of that collective support or concern about a certain issue, we try to address that as we move through the workshop program. So when there are things that the board wants to support or raise concerns, please let us know, because that's going to be how we adapt before our next workshop.
Okay, so to that extent, I don't know if the other board members want to chip in, or if you have any opinions as to the different line items that are being presented and what your input might or may not.
I just have questions. Trying to read this and thank you for going through it, but I see a couple of departments where you have an increase of labor. So did you take those positions from other departments or just new positions? I think it's with, board services and engineering, right? Am I looking at it right?
Yes, you are. Engineering and board services are the two increases.
So the board service, currently we have a 6, because so we're actually still looking for record management. That position has not been filled.
Okay,
Yeah.
but again, oh, so you're just showing actual numbers?
Yeah, as of right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
So you see that those two positions, we budget for 52, we're at 50. We did have our manager of engineering did move to the city of San Fernando as the public works director, and then we did have our records management supervisor depart for another opportunity at the city. I'm very pleased. We've gone through a couple rounds of recruitment for the records management position. I'm very pleased that our human resources department has been working extremely hard, and we're finally now starting to receive great qualified candidates for that position will be filled. Also, and I think you've all had the opportunity to meet our newly selected assistant general manager. Once on board, she'll be working with the executive manager of engineering operations to ultimately fill and kind of reorganize our engineering operations team. So we will be fully staffed, but again, I don't want to keep saying it, but we take great pride in coming under budget, and we'll be continuing to do that, especially when it comes to our labor.
So what I see, you have 50 people and you have 2 vacancies, right? Correct.
Just for my 2 bits, I think in being very consistent also with the position I held last year, we were able to function very well this year, and that was through no lack of effort on the part of all of our staff, and that is very commendable. But I have not and will not support a staffing level of 52. Okay, if there's no other comments, go ahead.
If you do not have any questions, I will ask Lucy to take the lead on page 33. Thank you, Mindy. Good morning. Quick overview of operations, and I'd like to emphasize in operations, obviously, keeping recycled water and potable water flowing. And in our department, we have what we call really these 3 key divisions. There's the process treatment division, the distribution, recycled water customer service, and then the water quality compliance. In addition, we also have the building maintenance, for the DLD building and some facilities. In distribution and the treatment, divisions, we also have contract operations. Also like to acknowledge Susanna, Lee, who has been in Office Department, one of the longest serving Office Department, program manager for our budget. And so great kudos and thank you to her. For years, she's been managing this, taking the cost very serious, which I appreciate. That also includes, monthly, budget to actual meetings with the finance department, with our contract operators, and other things that will help us try to keep up monthly and understand what's going on in the report. With that said, with these general, categories, you can see here, fine example, brought chemical costs down. And that's actually really a credit to a few things. Chemical costs are coming back down, we all remember after pandemic supply chain issues. The exception is sodium hypochlorite. That's something that I think a number of directors and management and DC was able to bring up. That's a risk, and it's also causing impact on cost, but everyone's aware the industry is tackling that. In addition, some optimization. After the big upset where we received the poor water quality, and not just acute, chronic, it really did, for lack of a better word, clog up our system. So that took quite a bit of time to get ahead of that. Our contract operator did do a concerted effort, and that really helped impact the optimization. Contract operations, you can see here a slight increase in cost, not out of the ordinary of some of the labor increases we're seeing, staffing up, in addition to, sometimes that's impacted by, if we have a lot more response reaction, but trying to keep that to a minimum, working collaboratively. Utilities, we were able to see a slight decrease. That's because of, the direct energy we've now getting in. There's a lot of alternatives out there these days, to have contracts. We'll probably be bringing, another alternative later this year to the board. We recognize that savings, sometimes that takes a year to be recognized, so we see that there in addition to, when the JMM project is complete, we should see a potable water reduction that will impact utility costs there. Facilities maintenance, that has to do with both contract operations, in addition to our own. That is something that, we try to keep at a minimum. That will go up. That is something we talk about aging infrastructure, and maybe even a concerted effort to really start tackling and doing a lot more, or on older equipment if we can, do more preventative maintenance, and getting ahead of that to try to keep some of our equipment at the solids, we don't anticipate, we will be going out to bid for our solids contracts a little bit later this year. We're not anticipating too much of an increase. I will say there are some new regulations and things coming down that could impact it. We're seeing facilities that are available shrinking and taller. Again, always that kind of balance, that's the entire industry. But right now, we feel pretty confident at this point. Consultants, for the operations department, when we see consulting and we have things like that, we are, we think of a lot of some of our sister agencies are often tackling one type of quality of water. So, for example, there might be other agencies who do a lot of groundwater injection or spreading. They may have dedicated hydrologists, people who focus specifically on that. They might even have some of the modeling programs. At West Basin, we rely often on a technical expert. We have a lot of our own staff that may be very aware, but we allow on that, we leverage that to be able to do our own reporting, but get what we need. CEQA might be an example of the things that we need, just to kind of help us. Another thing could be time. There are a lot of programs that staff would love to do, but for example, when we got the new brine permit, they'll have, get this done within 6 months, get this done within 12 months. Sometimes we get a new permit or regulation, the time that we have available in addition to the duties requires us to hurry and grab some expert assistance. Lab services, those are all mostly compliant. Sampling, those also are going up a little bit. We'll be going out to bid very shortly here. That's related to our new permit. I don't have a permit that don't ever get less regulation or less sampling. We have a new stormwater permit, so all of that is reflected in there. And we are trying to do some of our own innovative approaches. Then we get into some of the general administration, some of the overhead costs, are also reflected in the overall budget. Those are impacted by, again, other staff at West Basin, other duties that really are needed to keep recycled water and potable water flowing. Secondary influence, we do see a little bit of a anticipated decrease in that cost, also possible some of our projections. Something very interesting and we're working on, but I've noticed that a lot of other recycled water agencies have the same phenomena. When there's a drought and we have restrictions on potable water and recycled water does not have those restrictions, it just turns out that people will also reduce their recycled water. We've tried to market, when I speak to some people in Orange County, and we've spoken to some school districts, for example, here, and they may say, it's just easier for us to just time everything together, but that's maybe something that we'll be working on to combat that. So we'll see in the wetter years, the impact of that, bring that cost down. Permits, again, going up, some of those, the new surcharges. You'll see the labor and benefits, again, overhead allocation impacted by the various programs we have here that are PNC. And if we could advance to the next slide, I may have covered that, most of that, so we can then go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And this has to do with, it's called groundwater monitoring, and I want to differentiate. We have to do a lot of groundwater monitoring, that's actually one of the consulting budgets. We have a team that goes around. The barrier permit requires us to monitor groundwater wells, to look for any quote-unquote contamination from the water. This program is a beautiful program that's preceded my time here, where we offer a service to a number of our cities to help them with their compliance monitoring, so their annual CCNRs on drinking water. We currently have the city of Inglewood and the city of Manhattan Beach. Lomita has expressed some interest but hasn't really come to a full pass for that. What this program does is mostly a pass-through. We obviously have to put it as an expense to cover that. But that's a program in potable water that includes helping them with the new regs, scheduling all that sampling. That sampling is put on our contract, we have to get it to the lab. We cover that cost. This year, the UTMR, it's kind of every 5 years, big sampling that goes on in all the cities. We help them with that. That's often a year and a half. So it's a really neat, it's a very valued service that we provide. Mostly a pass-through, but we like to see that it is on the option.
Any comments on this particular?
I have a question, at least one question. So you said, Uzi, that some of the chemical costs are starting to come back in the line, or is that across the board, or what are you projecting?
Yeah, we have some detailed projections that we provide, and they're doing a great job, really trying to concentrate on quantity. But the market's just stabilizing, and that's where we're, except for chloride, even there's still some increases, but right now we are seeing that come back down, readjusting. There's some new regs that are coming down the pipeline that might bring up a few of those, but right now we're really looking at that stabilizing.
So that's stabilizing, but then the other thing you mentioned was something about the solids and the haulers and other folks. So is that industry somewhat contracting or something happening there that?
Yeah, really what's happening in that, behavior, we often get held accountable for food, right? So that's probably a perfect example, and I know our policy is working so that the water doesn't come out. I'd like to mention always that usually wastewater they produce recycled water, typically. And so we always have to be careful at West Basin, because sometimes we get left out of the exemption, sometimes for drinking water or wastewater, and that has been a big rate of coming in and making sure we're not left out. So related to your question, what's occurring with PFAS, now with And that proposal, that's really changing the options of where you can bring it to. We have to send all solids of hazardous waste to Natchez. That is a great cost. Appropriate or not, I don't need to comment on that, but it's just, it will add that cost, but there's also some people that start pulling out of it, because of liability, it really becomes a challenge, so we're watching that carefully, and we'll keep updating.
So, if we could, can we go back to the last slide real fast, please? Because, and it does tie into what Director Alvarez said a little, or the President Alvarez said a little earlier. So I understand how you're looking at this budget versus, you know, the adopted from last time versus projection. But, so looking, this year, your chemical costs, you're still anticipating we would, propose to authorize spending more than what we're projected thus far, understand. Now, the other thing is the consultant. So obviously, we have done well thus far on consultant spending, you know, versus the budget last time. But we're actually looking to spend even more on consultant for your particular department, if you will. So I guess, can you just tell us more about that? Because you guys saved a lot this last fiscal year, it looks like.
Correct. So I can tell you that last year, for example, we knew that our brine permits were coming. We know they're gonna often do special studies. We don't know what they are. We don't know when they're gonna give us that permit. So that's kind of been a challenge for us too, and I'll be quite upfront with that. We actually had a discussion. What's the best approach if we're pretty sure a new reg's coming, how do we account for that? So last year, the brine permit and how that was delayed, by the regional board, we just delayed that 3 to 6 months. So what we anticipated we might have had to trigger did not occur later. Then sometimes also even time we might have a project where, I'm going to say product protection survey is a great example. We're not staffed to be able to manage that, handle that, so we might have to delay something, so it was in the budget, but now we're gonna do it the following year, so that does occur as well. And that's just us always trying to do our best and time allocation, so those kind of things.
Okay. So there's some things built into this just because we anticipate it may happen in the next fiscal year, but we don't 100% know which.
Correct, there can be things that are like that. If we know a new reg or new permit's coming out, we don't know exactly, we try to follow other people's permits. Or also if we've delayed something, you know, there are some things you'll see regs will say, you must do this within a reasonable amount of time. Start asking other agencies, some reasonable might be every year, some every 5 years. This is audit protection, it's recommended every year, but we have a little bit of so that's something that if we're, overwhelmed with other things, we can push off.
Okay, so, and all that being said, so it's very interesting what you pulled in, and so that's also an area where even when things weren't budgeted, we obviously you can come back to the board and something comes up and we can tweak it. We can adjust
Yes.
on the fly.
You can always adjust the budget. The concern is, and again, it comes back to a conservative approach. You don't include it now and you want to add it later. You can't adjust the rates to collect for that, what you'd be doing in service.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Director Gray.
The labor and benefit cost expense, rather, that's paid to the consultant? What is that?
Within the labor.
Labor and benefits to 3 million?
Correct. That's West Basin.
That's West Basin staff?
Yes.
That's not the bill, you know, who has the.
The other staff labor is under contract operation,
The second line,
contract operation.
oh, the 11 million, oh.
Correct.
And so the 3+ million is paid to West Basin staff. And so what's general administration, is that West Basin?
General administration includes insurance, so the big jump there is the Aqua JPIA insurance has jumped significantly. So what we budgeted last year was about $290,000. This year going forward, it's $460,000. That's just based on current what we saw and what we got from JPIA. So we saw a significant increase.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments, questions? First, it's great to see that the overall anticipated budget for recap water operations and come in about 3.7 million, under the, adopted budget. Seems like the majority of that is all lower the chemical costs. So question, I know that we raised the chemical, budget a couple of times, I believe. Is the adopted budget that we're looking here reflect those changes that were made mid-year? Or whenever we made them, like a little earlier mid-year?
I think that, and I can answer anticipated questions from you, why we have roughly about 3.7 or 3 million plus on the budget. That's because mainly our production, which is barrier, we're like, roughly about half of what we projected. A lot of the issues is because of mechanical equipment issues, and we have membranes that are waiting to be replaced, that right now is tempering our production at this point. So we projected around 11,000 this fiscal year, and we're roughly under, around 5,000 acre feet at this point. And, so that ties a lot, the chemical costs ties to that production. Also, what affected, the chemical cost is hypochlorite. Hypochlorite is about 37% of the chemical cost. And our Title 22 production has significantly increased as well this year. So that is the main driver why we see this at this point. Obviously, for fiscal year 2025, we budget what we already optimistic on what we're going to be doing. And then tend to say why we do more than what we project for the year. That's really driven by our projection.
Thank you, and thank you for anticipating my questions. I was gonna say, I think we budgeted to buy, but we didn't need to buy we didn't buy as much as we thought we were gonna buy. All right, that's good, you're starting to read my mind, that's scary. I'm back to the, most of the other line items are pretty much either at or, a little over the adopted budget, but the big savings, other savings with the consultants, between the actual projection and the adopted, and it's kind of been brought up already. And I saw the examples that you've given, it still didn't find a justification for budgeting for almost $500,000, $500,000, more, money in that particular item, so maybe you can come back and, not today, so we'll move on, but provide it, here's all the consultants and the estimated cost of the consultants that come up with that number and why we need them. All right? So, okay, going.
I will ask Amy, oh, no, sorry.
I think we're on page 36.
Yeah, page 36, right?
Mhm.
I will ask Amy to take the lead up.
Good afternoon. So I'll just briefly go over the categories, and if you want to need more detail, I'm happy to speak in more detail. But for the Water Harvest Festival, let me know if you can't hear me. We just have a lower cost of $1,000, and that's really attributed to the fact that we have some permit fees in the city that we're just rolling up into the event production coordination process that we have. So that's there. I did want to note for Water Harvest that two things that, you know, aren't reflected here, but are in other PowerPoints in the, later on in the presentation, is that we do expect to request more, higher reimbursement amount from the Metropolitan Water District through their local programs, higher than last year. And then we also do plan to solicit sponsorships again. So last year, we raised more than ever. We fundraised about $40,000 to offset the cost. So I think those two will bring that cost down in reality. For art contest, it's an additional $1,000 just to account for some increase in iPad, you know, reward or awards costs, as well as some supplies when they go into the classroom to give art lessons. For water exploration, our school tour program, that, you know, the field trips that come here to this facility, we, looking at just some higher costs for bus services, a few more, lessons. We're also having the docents and, the trainers that come and lead, the tours of the children, just, have a few more this year to account for some kind of ad hoc requests, you know, Girl Scouts and those type of community groups that are, youth-oriented. And so that adds on to, account for that $28,000. And then, for education, the fourth line item here, the cost savings of $29,000 are directly a reflection of metropolitan funding that we expect to, you know, have reimbursed for our Water Star kits. Those are the conservation kits we send home with the kids. And then, in addition, no, that's that item. And then for outreach, you'll see an increase of nearly $50,000. And, that's primarily to continue on with our conservation, support, whether it's promoting our incentives that we do maintain or our education about, you know, continuing to conserve water. I think it's really ultimately a behavior change that takes a lot of work to enact. And so we want to keep up the momentum, without, you know, the urgency that we were back when we saw the drought. So we do continue, we see this as an investment in that. And I know the board's always been supportive of our conservation and education efforts, so we appreciate that. And so that's the majority. I do want to note, sorry, of that, in addition to the education elements, we did include some funding for workforce development support. I know we really enjoyed doing our career fair, and we're looking at how to, you know, what's next, how do we take that to the next level, how to evolve, and then how to also, you know, tap into what the general manager may have planned. So I think that will be, and that's roughly about $10,000 that will give us some flexibility to support programs or host various events. So with that, I will conclude there, and if there's any questions or details.
I have a couple of questions, and, so one of them is, the water harvest, we do get some money potentially back from Metropolitan. How much normally?
Well, so last year we budgeted for only $10,000, and then we ended up having more, availability, so I think ultimately we landed at, about 17,000, just under 17,000 in.
32,000.
Oh, for, all things told? Not just successful? Okay, so all inclusive for our department. And then, yes, we would plan to request 30,000 for this event.
Okay, so we get, I really didn't realize that we could get some money from Metropolitan.
You know, we only just started that really in the past couple of years to maximize that program, and so, Matt has been really, terrific in collaborating, to make sure that we're covering those costs.
That's good.
And Jason, if I could add to that, as Amy just said, Matt is leading this effort. Metropolitan Water District has long had that MAA program to provide money, funds back to the member agencies. Very few agencies are able to capture and utilize 100%. Matt has taken that on, and so everything that we can fund for that MAA program, you'll see in this budget, because we're trying to get back everything.
That's great. So the fact is, I mean, look, I know it's expensive. I love Water Harvest. I support it fully. As a matter of fact, I was there this morning at the PTA Run for Education, and a lot of our folks in this region come to the Water Harvest, and they know we do it. They talk about it all the time. So we have to continue doing it, and you all have done a pretty good job of managing costs. So back to this, so you can get money from Met. You got the sponsorships, which is good. I do understand you can look to be as lean as you can be for the event itself. You may or may not have the answer to this question, but obviously groundwater harvest down at WRD, I don't know how much they spend. They spend a lot, I'm sure. But I also don't know how much they offset it with, sponsorships. Does anybody know or not?
I do know that they did receive sponsorships, West Basin is one of the sponsors.
Right.
And I do know that they held those sponsors, but, I see Eric in the back of the room, I don't know if he has it. He might be able to answer that one.
You don't know. Okay.
But it is good.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, and, you know, maybe it's just a quick question to them, you know, it would be interesting, you know, what they spend and then what they also offset relative with the sponsorship, because again, these are really good community service events. And I, you know, I hate leaning on sponsors for everything, right? We don't like having to do it, but it really helps us, public agency, just like people ask us to sponsor their events too. So, you know, that's just the way it works. But,
I think that we don't have sponsors.
oh, no, we do. We do, $40,000 this last
That's our
year.
biggest-
Oh, that's how you make
Significant.
40,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do account for the full cost in the event that we can't predict what people may want to contribute, and so that's why I just added it as an aside as ways we offset costs, so we do plan to solicit sponsorships again.
Right. So, do you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, you might recall that last year our water harvest, actually exceeded our budget. This year, you know, pretty significantly below budget. It's still a great event. Was done in part because of the sponsorships and the A fund. But I also wanted to point out too, you can see the outreach, the variance here is, roughly, $50,000. And that, portion of that is being funded through our grant program.
The MAA.
No, the outreach.
Some things, not others.
Mostly for our grass replacement programs, there's some outreach included in our federal grants. And then we do have nearly $70,000 that we have put in the budget for the coming year, for outreach, water harvest, some education, that would come from the member agencies.
Okay, so I'd like to crank through this real quick again. So, the water harvest, I think we just need to maximize the sponsorship as much as possible, lean on all of the partners that can give something, that's just great. Helps it. Now, I do see, of course, again, you know, adopted version versus projected, so overall, we're actually spending less money. So for example, and particularly, well, I was gonna jump to the bottom, but let's talk about the school tours. So we actually have spent less so far on school tours than we thought we would, but we're anticipating maybe more. So what
Yeah, you know, I will just say, I probably could have been a little bit, more conscientious in my projections. So I'll leave it at that, and I was working with what information I had. We did strive, overall, I'll say the approach to the budget was maintaining what we have right now, and then looking for ways to offset costs through the grants, through our funding opportunities, and we also do, request sponsorships for our contests as well, to contribute to the prizes. So, yeah, just.
But on the school tours, like, is this predominantly paying for the buses
Yes,
and
water,
transportation?
yes, transportation, which we do see a little bit of going up in cost.
Right,
We did, like I was mentioning, adding a little bit more school tour support so that we can do some of these ad hoc routes.
okay.
And then the other area, this would be number 3 here, we have an in-classroom program as well, so we
Yeah.
go out into the schools, and some of the costs per class, are a little bit higher as well. So, you know, we kept the same quantity and number of, but, we expect costs to rise just a little bit there. So I think those are the main categories, and then the workforce development falls under this item as well.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, so that's kind of a new cost that we didn't do last
You
year.
put that under school tours?
Yes, I believe so, I'm not, it could have gone under education, I suppose, but, we.
Okay, so when we do those contracts for the transportation, is it a 2 or 3 year contract with the bus company or whoever?
It's each year, I believe, and I know we're going out to bid, we're in the process of 3 of those contracts, the school tour, program, so, the buses and, the school tour being kind of roundhouse basically, and then, the other one being the in-room classroom.
Right.
Mhm.
So the bus trip contracts, those are 1 year contracts, is that?
I would double check, but yes, generally they are. Mhm.
Is there a reason we do 1 year, why couldn't we do 2 or 3, and maybe somebody will hold the line on the rate?
Let me double check, we can. Usually there's like a threshold as well, so it depends on what the dollar amount, so multi-year contract
Well, you know,
options, if there's cost savings.
I think that, general manager, you should look at that, because maybe if it's something we're bringing back to us, why can't we get a 2 year contract or a 3 year contract out of out of an organization, potentially, if it's gonna save us some money, I don't know.
We'll look at that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, I know you have so many slots, I guess, that's what I'll call it, slots for school trips, right?
Mhm.
And you put out the call, and then the schools fill in the slots. Do we have some that just go unaccounted for because, you know, they didn't all,
Yeah,
Bill?
if you rescheduled or there's a
Uh-huh.
rating delay or something. Yeah, so usually, Janelle, who leads these programs, will go back out to the educators who maybe had to, you know, reschedule on their own. So they're typically maxed out, even when we come back to say, you know, we didn't, you know, utilize our
Yeah.
slot, you know, there. So, we do tend to max out.
just anticipating that, you know, because I know you'll say, I'm budgeting for 30 tours, but maybe 25 actually came into fruition, that's why we see savings, or not.
Mhm.
Okay. And then lastly, on the outreach, which, again, last year we did $275,300, but you guys have come in only at 120 thus far, so supposedly, which is, I mean, that sounds great on paper, but now you're really asking for even more than what we gave last time, even though we didn't spend it.
I think what I attribute to some of those lower projections, and there's some events that we thought we might have this fiscal year, didn't quite happen, so a lot of people have recycled water events that we plan to celebrate, and for whatever
right.
reason didn't
Some of
happen.
the ribbon cuttings and other things
Yeah.
can happen, things
And
like
then there's some events that are just, cyclical in nature, so
Uh-huh.
I think, installation ceremony is one of those, right?
Sure.
You connect
And next year you got
a little
some.
bit. So it's like some that, you know, it's like we didn't spend it, but we're still, it's not like we're double counting really, we just
No,
haven't
no.
spent it.
So this is what I'm saying, I think personally is, I think you could, and this is not a criticism, I just think we've actually come in much better overall than what we, you know, adopted last cycle. So you may be able to look at these just to trim some numbers, you might, but I think that would be good. And then one last thing, and this is just on outreach, because I know we do a lot of printing, you know, with flyers and this and that and the other. And you guys, by the way, you know, you always give us flyers and, you know, I'm gonna do this, you know, let me ask you if I need the flyers, because sometimes you give me flyers and I'm not gonna use them, and I, you know, I'll give them back or I'll recycle them, but, you know, one is just for us, you probably don't need to give us flyers unless we ask, and this is not a criticism, it's just, you know what, I'd love to get this big packet, but, you know, I may not be able to get rid of those, okay? But more importantly, I have no clue how many of those flyers we're printing that really don't end up getting used, or they're not being used when you drop them at places. So I think you might be able just to save some money by not printing as many.
Yes, or bringing in sustainable, I know we've kind of moved towards QR codes and whatnot.
Yes.
I do
a lot
think
of
there's
electronic.
some desire for it, but you're right, once it's out in the world and in
Yeah.
our community, who's to say, you know,
Yeah.
they're being, when we do work with South Bay Environmental Services Center to recover some of that and take
Okay.
stock, quote unquote, but I agree.
Like, okay, and last thing on that, it's like the drinking bottle filling stations or whatever, so those are only really for public agencies, you know, the average person, I'm not gonna go put those out at the Elsinore Library, you know, you guys give me a pile of those things, I'm not gonna go stick them in, you know, because those are a very specific targeted audience, right, your public agencies, so that's one, hypothetically, you wouldn't need to print a ton of those, because that's so specific, right, and you probably don't need to put them in the folder that goes to the average resident, right? That, just for example. Instead, you know, to focus more on printing like the grass rebate. So just, I'm looking at ways too, like where would we not need to spend extra money? Where do we do better with the electronic version? I know you send those to the school districts and others, they put them in newsletters, and that's probably one of the most effective ways that people get it, rather than the big printed piece, unless they're gonna distribute it at the school or something like that. So, anyway, just thinking of ways you might be able just to trim and, you know, watch our money better. Thank you.
All right, just to move on, I,
One quick question.
Yes.
Really quick. Where does workforce development and the job fair fall under, which categories, of school tours or outreach?
You know, it was under education, so I think I put it under school tours, I'll double check right now, but it's under education, and it's broken out like that. Art contest, water exploration, and education are all K-12 programs, and it falls under there.
So so the job fair we had was, out of that category?
This year, it was out of the outreach category because I mentioned we didn't have as many events as I anticipated, so I pulled it from an outreach, category. We didn't have anything, budgeted per se for that. So, that's why I was like, well, this is clearly aiming at a younger, I mean, obviously broader than K-12, but, that's where I put it this year, but, you know, I can.
Yeah. I see a significantly more money for outreach than I think was used, and a little bit more than was budgeted. So I assume you're anticipating more outreach for job fairs and more for,
I would say the boost there, the increase there is primarily for conservation, the continued momentum to drive behavior change and to continue to save water. That's where some of that bigger chunk went in there, seeing it as an investment there. But certainly, you know, the other big part of the outreach is just more events.
I just want to emphasize, job fair, workforce development, that's what I'm emphasizing.
Okay, yes, we're on board, yes.
Gotcha, okay, thank you, Suzanne.
Okay, any comments from this side of the gallery? Just real quick on this, our bottom line, we're anticipating spending $3.5 million this year. You're asking for $4.9 million. That's over $1.4 million more, or about a 45% increase over this year. I think you can do better, and actually in your proposed budget, come back with a, more fine-tuned, expenditure proposal than what you currently. All right, so we will move on
Can I just point out
to,
one thing? I'm sorry, I know, EJ, I just want you to speak to the general overhead allocation in terms of our outreach and participation from staff. I think that attributes to a little bit of a boost in that increase, but, because sometimes our staff bill to, our overhead code. But point taken, we'll look to trim for both, all of your points.
we were able to survive with $3.5 million this year. A 5 or 10% increase on that would be significant. You're looking at over 45%. Okay, so water policy and resources, Nick?
I'll take that one. So I'm on packet page 37. So I'll just kind of point out here that the majority of the water policy and resources budget is allocated to the district, state, and federal legislative advocacy efforts, at least in terms of the programmatic costs. West Basin has 2-year agreements in place with Van Scoyoc Associates for federal issues and Neomel Pappas and Associates for state issues. And based on the work that they provide us throughout the year, but then also for those of you who have been on a couple of our recent state and federal leaderships, I think you would agree that they do a great job of representing our interests. Other costs for this division, as you can see here, includes our water bottle filling station grant program, professional service needed to help the district develop and submit a required annual water supply and demand assessment, as well as some professional support services to help the district research, identify, and apply for state and federal grant opportunities, which in this current fiscal environment, I think is more important than ever. We're also requesting some additional funding this year to help our retailers achieve compliance with the state's new conservation regulations. Those are expected to be finalized over the summer, and we want to continue to assist our retailers in understanding what's required of them over the next 3 to 5 years. And I can tell you that, especially with our municipal retailers, they need a lot of help. And so, you know, we feel as their wholesaler, we want to try to provide some support to them at this time. So that concludes this slide, but I could take any questions if there are.
Any questions or comments on this? Again, same comment that I had previously. We're looking at spending $1.9 million this year. You're projecting or budgeting or asking to budget $2.3 million, which is about another $400,000 more. And it just seems that that's a significant increase, much more than 5 or 10% of an annual increase anticipated. So I'd like to see that number either explained further or come back with a better
Yeah,
number.
I think it's probably
All right,
the same case where other departments are charging some of their time to our cost account. And so I think that makes up the majority of the increase there, but we can certainly look at that.
President,
yes, sir.
now, part of that is the state and federal lobbyists, obviously, the number just went up, right? Isn't that what it is?
But
You got a contract?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got the current one, but when we got the new one, right? That's assistance based. new numbers.
Correct, but it was actually the same as the last year.
The other thing is, and I understand the new retail regulation support, I know, I know vaguely what you mean, but I don't know how much extra we're gonna do on behalf of some other municipalities, but is $30,000, do we really have to spend $30,000 to help them out, or you had 10,000 last time, but you didn't use it? So-
If I could add to that,
Yeah.
Director Houston, as I mentioned, I am reaching out to each and every one of our retailers. These issues are the ones that continue to come up from our retailers, because they appreciate our help. It's worth noting, and they pointed out, they are in fact paying for that help, because it's their rates that are allowing us to do that. But as Matt mentioned, our whole municipals, Inglewood, Alameda, El Segundo, and Manhattan, they are primarily the ones that really need the help. If you look at the investor-owned utilities, they do have corporate assistance that allows them to engage on these issues. However, if you look at the local district offices, they also need assistance. So all of the workshops that we've held in relation to the regulation have been very well attended and very well appreciated by our retailers.
So you're telling me that it's usually, this pays for like workshops, not like one-on-one assistance with staff to staff?
Well, I would say, last year, we held a workshop with all of our retailers on the new,
One workshop?
draft regulations.
One workshop?
One workshop last year. And this year, our plan is to hold some one-on-ones with staff, with our staff and the retailers, to kind of find out what their needs are based on the adopted regulations, which will happen this summer.
Okay.
And so it would be, our thought is that we would bring this consultant into those meetings with us to see how we can kind of educate, inform, and then really drill down into what they need going, what are the pain points, the biggest pain points for our retailers in the coming years. So that's the thought there.
Gotcha. Okay, and then lastly, grant development, so we want to propose having $30,000 for grant development, what exactly does that mean?
Again, in terms of grant development, we have in years past utilized a consultant to assist us as far as getting the grant applications prepared and submitted. They also help us identify those grants.
Right.
It's worth noting that the funds dedicated here is a time and material basis. So as we identify grants and we apply for them, we utilize that. If we choose not to apply for any grants, or if we get different opportunities, we wouldn't be spending any money. Obviously, I've been working with staff. We're looking under every rock for every dollar,
Right.
For our conservation programs, but also the R&R here at the
So again, we adopted money this last time, but we didn't use it, so you didn't.
Yeah, we actually have an RFP in place right now. I'd hoped to do it a few months ago, but we're just now getting that out there. So I'd hope to have some cost this current fiscal year, but now it would kind of be pushed into the next one.
Okay, so this is for hiring a consultant to help us with grant writing, grant
Yeah,
acquisition. Okay, and I'm fine with that, I totally get it, I just wanted to understand. And then, now back to new regulations, support, again, maybe this is one of those areas where I just don't know if this number is the right number or not. Maybe you bring it back down to 10, I just don't know, EJ.
You can look at the cost breakdown. You may recall, I believe it's WFC. We had utilized the same consultant that we utilize for our urban water management plan.
Okay.
And really what they do is they calculate and look specifically at the water demand in each of our retailer agencies. They're reporting with the State Water Resources Control Board and identify opportunities to get them in compliance. You might recall McDowell's also helps in part of the conservation program. So we can look at that as part of reducing it, but like I said, this is a program that our retailers have been highly supportive.
Like I said, I'm just really looking at every number here, you guys could potentially trim, or you think.
Okay, anything else? So we'll move on to water use efficiency and conservation.
so I'll take this one again, packet page 38. And you'll see here at the top, that's kind of a big number there that we're proposing in terms of a decrease from last year's adopted budget. And I know that our general manager kind of spoke to this at the last budget workshop, but the reason for such a large budget number last year was the way that Metropolitan Water District operates its grass replacement rebate program. Anytime that somebody applies, that's considered an obligation of both their funds and our funds if we provide a matching dollar, which we do. And so last year, we had a lot of carryover from a previous fiscal year. And basically, Metropolitan told us that if we didn't increase our budget, we weren't going to be able to fund any new projects. Now, some of those projects might have moved forward, some of them might not have. But this year, the carryover is a lot less. So that's a good thing because we have a little more certainty in the new projects that we can fund. But the other thing that I do want to mention here is what this funding level of $500,000 will do is to first and foremost fully utilize the remaining state and federal grant funds that we currently have. So we expect to have up to $250,000 in both state from DWR and federal from USBR in grants through the end of the next fiscal year. So if we're fortunate enough to fully exhaust those available grant funds, which could be difficult, but we certainly are going to try to, and we continue to see strong demand for those rebates, then staff could come back to the board for consideration of additional funds. But I think that $500,000 is a pretty good level, and it just happens to match how much grant funds we have left. I also want to assure you that, you know, even though this is a lesser amount for grass replacement, we're not going to pull back on any of our efforts on these programs, you know, whatsoever. We definitely have some outreach funding in the grants to do more outreach for these folks, and so that's not going to change next year. So we'll continue to go full force to get that full $500,000 allocated. Are there any questions about grass removal before I guess I move to the rest?
Matt, I might just add one thing. In order for us to get to the budget amount of a little over $1 million, we actually worked through the budget process, but then we also came back to the board to up that budget amount. I've instructed staff to closely monitor our accounts at Metropolitan Water District to see how much money we have in each of the buckets, because they have multiple different buckets as far as the grass replacement fund. So if we see that we are getting low, we will come back to the board for your consideration if you wanted to increase that. But this, we think, is a good projection of what we could spend this fiscal year.
Mr. Carmetta, thank you for saying that, and you too, Matt, because it is an important program in the fact that you're pursuing grants and anticipating grant funding to come in to reduce the amount. It's great, but you also have your focus on making sure you have a program. That's important. Thank you.
Thank you. So the other programs funded, shown here on this page is the South Bay City Council of Governments, which you're all very familiar with. We support the district in a multitude of ways, including outreach, education, events, and others. We're just proposing to keep that contract at the same amount, which we're kind of going through that process right now. And then the next line you'll see there is our rain barrel distribution program, which I do just want to point out that proposed column, it should actually say $128,000, which would be the same as last year. That budget supports 1,500 rain barrels, so 300 rain barrels in each director's division. And we really feel that that's a threshold that's possible to achieve with moderate levels of outreach. And then I'll just say that there is a cost offset there. We get $35 per rain barrel rebate from Metropolitan, so that's about $52,000 that we get back in terms of a cost share from Metropolitan on that. And I know that there have been some comments about possibly increasing the amount of rain barrels next year. However, we kind of feel based on the current fiscal climate and looking at areas to cut costs, we do feel that the added cost of giving away a greater number of rain barrels, the necessary marketing and outreach that would be needed to support the giving away additional units, and potentially some additional shipment and delivery costs should be deferred for now, but staff is of course happy to consider additional rain barrels if that's the will of the board of directors. And then we're also proposing to build upon some work that was done this year in the current fiscal year to identify opportunities for commercial, industrial, and institutional programs that can help our retailers achieve future compliance with pending conservation regulations. And that would come in the form of an actual program that can either reduce CII water use, provide support needed to meet some of the CII best managed practices that would be required of them. There's the non-functional turf ban that's going to be, kind of going into place over the next few years. So this program would be something that helps specifically in that regard. Are there any questions before I go to my last slide? Okay.
Thank you.
The only thing that was, so the rain barrel, the numbers here, that you said is actually not correct, it's just gonna be the same,
It should be 128, yeah, 128.
that's within 128. And by the way, I was the one that thought we should do more rain barrels, and I really still think we should, but in light of what you said and other things, I'm good with keeping it 1,500 in total this year, I'm fine with that.
Okay, we'll move to the next slide, please. Okay, I'll just point out a couple highlights here, keep this thing moving. On the second row, you'll see the Las Virgenes Partnership. This is the new regional water efficiency program that we're doing in some of the northern parts of our service area. This program is completely grant funded, so we have a grant, we have a partnership in place with Las Virgenes and LA County. So that $129,000 would be the entire cost. You might be wondering why we didn't spend any this year. That was an estimate for what we expected to maybe spend this year if the program had started in the current fiscal year. Due to some delays with getting the partnership up and running, that's just going into the next year now. So that's the $120,000. And then the Parkway Beautification Program on that next line, we're proposing another $150,000. This is the low income program that the board just approved last month. And we've already seen, I believe, almost 100 applicants come in for that. So we're really excited about what we're seeing there. There's a lot of demand from our low-income communities, from eligible residents. So we're moving forward on that in this fiscal year, but we'd like to just kind of plan ahead for the next fall to do the same type of program. And again, this program would be 100% funded by Metropolitan's MAA program. And the only other thing I'll mention is the SoCal Gas Partnership. This was another low-income device installation program that was successful for the last 2 years. However, we're no longer planning to offer that program in the coming years. So that's why you see the big decrease there. Are there any questions?
Any other questions for Rick and Greg?
Yeah, I'm sure I missed what you said about, what is the partnership with Las Virgenes? What is that?
Yeah, so it's a three-way partnership between Las Virgenes, West Basin, and LA County Waterworks District to do mostly device installation, I think some grass replacement in Malibu, Topanga. So it's kind of a continuance of the Malibu Smart and Topanga Smart programs that came to a conclusion last year. So it's kind of a continuance of that.
Got it. And then, Parkway Beautification, can you explain that a little bit more? What is that actually in the center of the street, or is that something?
So it's the space between the sidewalk and the curb. Yeah, so there's different words for it, but Parkway is one of the, I think, kind of one of the more common terms.
Is that district-wide?
It is, yes. So right now, we're actually doing 5 projects in each of the 5 divisions, and we would plan to do roughly the same thing next year.
Can you tell me where you're doing it in my division, please?
Yeah,
if you know now.
I can get you a map that shows you exactly where those projects are.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So Matt, that is a low income.
Yes, it is.
Program, correct?
It is, yes, yep.
So it's offered in all 5 divisions, but the location of each project needs to fit within that category.
What do you put in the parkway? Trees?
It could be trees, but mostly, decomposed granite or rocks, and then, low water using plants. We want to make sure that it's ADA compliant, so we get pathways between the curb and the sidewalk.
We're moving the ground.
Yeah.
You can email me the location of.
Yeah, we can get that.
Okay, I'm very supportive of that program, so thank you to know that even in Division Three, it tends to be very wealthy that we have, low-income areas. Just in summary again, same comment, our projected is $1.95 million. We're budgeting 2.43, that's almost $500,000, $480,000 more. Seems like, that's a significant increase, and maybe you can revisit this and bring it more in line to what actual, expenses are. So we'll move on to technical planning.
Good afternoon, directors. On technical, the intent of the technical planning program, and by the way, we're on packet page 40. The intent of the technical planning program is the delivery of technical and strategic studies associated with our Water for Tomorrow program goals. So historically, we've had studies that are, financial, related to West Basin finances, operation and maintenance, compliance, and also, engineering in this program. And you can see on the first line item here on the table, you may recall last year we talked about 8 different studies or evaluations or assessments. We called a lot of them feasibility studies last year that relates to the future of our recycled water program, how our program could be integrated with the other emerging programs from Metropolitan, LA County, and the city of LA. You may recall last year the board asked us to look for external funding to kickstart some of these studies. We got funding from Metropolitan for one of the studies, and that study has been completed. It was a hydraulic analysis study. The 7 other ones in this upcoming budget, we're only assuming staff time right now until we secure external funding and bring that item back to the board before we kickstart any analysis moving forward. So there's no consulting costs included in the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. The cost of service study, as you know, we're hoping to conclude that this fiscal year, so there's no consulting costs included in next year's budget. Bulk chemical storage condition assessment, you may recall from last month's Engineering and Operations Committee, we reported on staff's intent to develop a program for the rehabilitation and replacement of chemical tanks. There have been a few of them that have failed in recent years. What we're looking to do in this study is to get the appropriate resources, external resources, to conduct condition assessments to 47 of our 69 chemical tanks. We've done some preliminary analysis, as we reported last month. This is to take it up to the next level. The intent of it is to allow us to proactively assess what tanks we could be replacing in the short term and develop a prioritized program for that. Emergency response planning, you may recall that we concluded our risk and resiliency assessment. There were some recommendations coming out of that. So for next fiscal year, we're only including staff time to move forward with some of the recommendations, developing scope for a few items that the analysis asked us to consider and potentially develop a project for, but no consulting dollars for that. The climate change plan, the actual wording for that is the climate change effects vulnerability assessment and mitigation plan. That is a requirement that came in from the renewal of the brine permit. So the board is asking us to prepare this assessment to look at how climate change could impact our overall program, whether it's a flooding event, whether it's an impact on the water quality, whether it's an impact on our production. So we are supposed to complete the plan by January 2025. So we have included some dollars for consultant help in that plan. Go back. Table. Salt and nutrient management plan. That is a plan that was led by WRD and developed in 2015. That plan included anti-degradation analysis and worked to satisfy a lot of what the regional board looks for when we propose a recycled water project. Recent correspondence coming in from the regional board have indicated that that plan may need to be updated. So what we have in this technical planning budget is just for some staff time to provide support to WRD, and no more at this time. If the plan proceeds and update is necessary, and we project that WRD will ask stakeholders, including West Basin, to chip in for the development of the plan, but we don't know what that dollar amount would be at this point. And again, we think it's likely that the plan will have to be updated, but we don't know for sure. So this is just, here includes the staff time, and you can see the last item there is the staff time that we project for the technical planning program. Overall, we did have a budget of $5.2 million, but the overwhelming majority of that were for all of the studies that we continue to look for external funding for. So the proposed budget is at $1.1 million, which is slightly above what we were projecting to spend this year. In the next slide, we give a little bit more information. I already talked about just the two studies that have some consulting costs associated with them. That's the bulk chemical storage condition assessment and the climate change vulnerability assessment. That concludes the technical planning. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions or comments here? All right, same comment that I had previously. You did very well in bringing in this particular program under budget at $916,000. The projected expenditures from 1.143 is over 220,000 more. That's over 20% increase. I would ask for reconsideration on really the chemical storage condition assessment and how much money is going to be spent on that. But that kind of brings us to the end of one of these presentations, and I think we're transitioning now to district overhead. I have a question. This was all operation expenses. That's not all of our expenses. The district overhead is additional expenses. Okay, to date, if we just look at the operating expenses, the total that we spent this year is $62.13 million. If you increase that by 10%, not by the budget, but the proposed budget, and 10% would be, I think, a very generous across the board increase. In some cases, it may be more or less. 10% increase will get you to $68 million, and a 5% increase would have been $65 million, as opposed to where we're at, which we're closer to $80 million in there. So just food for thought. We're asking for significantly more than 5 and 10% increase. We'll move on. Go ahead.
I guess I have two questions. One is the climate change plan, but unfortunately, this is something we have to do because of the regional board, correct?
Yes, this is the plan.
So basically, everybody under their jurisdiction is doing the work that like we're doing. Has to do this.
I don't know about everybody, but certainly folks that have NTDS permits.
Yeah, that's what I mean by everybody who has the permit.
Yep.
So it's kind of like one of those unfunded mandate type of things, right? I mean, we're just forced to do it and have to spend this money. And they realize that, right? I mean, they realize that we've got to
Yeah.
spend money we didn't expect to spend.
And we did go a little bit back and forth with them before the permit was, adopted on this particular subject. They've asked for other requirements as well
Mhm.
that, that we accounted for in the compliance budget. This one was more technical planning related, so we included it in this budget here. But yes, they are requiring that, and I do have to use a year to spend on that if necessary.
I just, do we think it's really gonna cost $150,000 or?
We did reach out to about 6 different groups on the state fence,
Mhm.
and boy, it really ranged depending on the project. $48,000.
Okay, all right, and then my last thing before we move on would be back to page 31, which was the summary of the West Basin labor and benefits. And I do understand what President Alvarez said about not supporting potential of 2 additional employees, that's a deal breaker. But what I do want to understand is, there were only the 2 positions, so in engineering, you're looking at having 1 additional person, and then also board services, it looks like 1 additional person. And I don't know where you were gonna talk about that, EJ, but I just didn't want to lose sight of that. Can you tell us now what that exactly means, these 2 potential positions?
Yeah, so we are not increasing the number of positions. We have 2 vacancies that are vacant.
Okay.
One of which is the manager of engineering. And the second is it's under our admin, or board services. It's actually our records management.
Oh,
And that's a crucial position. It's just been very tough to find, people that are qualified for that position. Again, I want to give credit to our human resources department for really pushing that out there. And we hope to close that position.
Okay, so you are right, and on that one, I apologize because I was looking at our first column, but you're right, it was in the adopted budget, but we already had the 2 positions, and the records management position, you're right, under board services, so I do understand, we've had a conversation about that. I know those people are really, really difficult to find, so I get it. And then also, your engineering manager, is that what?
That's correct.
What was the position again?
It's the position that was vacated by Wendell Johnson,
And what was the title?
manager of engineering.
Manager, okay. So really, you're not adding new positions, I mean, it's just, I understand what the President said, but, I think we would need more clarification as to what that means, and I don't know if that means that we could do, you all could do everything else we asked, but if there was 2 added positions, that's gonna be a no vote, but I don't wanna, presuppose what you're doing, or say I would vote for or against that based on number of employees. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Then we'll move on to district overhead expenditures.
Yes, Allison will take the lead on page 43.
Good afternoon, directors. I'm on page 45, with over information technology. Here you'll see the adopted budget for fiscal year 23-24 was 1.6 million, and our proposed budget is about 1.6 million. Also, I'd like to point out to the left column of the projection, is about 1.2 million. We do see that from the variance that we highlight in the red box. The first one is the consultant. We originally had adopted a budget of 140. Our expected projection for the current fiscal year is 150. In the new proposed budget, we are proposing 267,000. At the bottom of that, we did kind of list some high level what we were expecting to spend on that. Continuation of system, financial system improvement, support and training. They're all updating the system and then providing that training back to staff to make sure we utilize our ERP system.
fourth, in this upcoming year, we're gonna do an agenda, management system implementation. We're gonna move away from Track and new one. And so we're gonna actually have to run two systems in tandem, and so we're gonna incur some costs for implementation and two software license renewals. One license renewal for agenda management and a new one. In temporary labor, we did highlight that as well, because that is a drop. And for, you see a contraction about 46,600 there. We did get a temp labor to assist staff with building out special reports for us to optimize efficiency in the department. And then in the new year, we're proposing a new one, or a continuation, please, for the IT staff. In the third row, you'll see equipment and supplies. That's pretty standard of making sure that we have the right equipment for staff, whether it may be parts or equipment. And then the software license, you'll see it is an increase from the adopted budget to $1.1 million. It is a $323,000 increase. We do have a few things that are coming up for renewal. We do have our Microsoft Suite, and that's about 90 days. In this past year, we did add an AP automation into our software license. The finance team, and overall the district has made improvements in making sure that we capture all the invoices coming in and proper payments at time. Also, it does, like I mentioned earlier, it does include the agenda management software license. And we are proposing only two new software licenses in that category. The one, as I mentioned, was agenda management and potentially a project management software tool for our engineers. The last two are our telephone expenses and lease expenses. Those are going to stay. We did see that we did have some double counting in the past for telephone expenses, but this year you'll see that we did bring that back down. While our lease expenses will stay the same, and that's really just for the copiers and postage. And I can pause there for any questions.
A question.
Go ahead,
Your telephone expenses are strictly for landlines,
It's for landline, internet, and also district cell phone for staff.
or what?
District cell phone?
Any other questions on this? Okay, same comment, projections this year is to spend 1.2 million, we're budgeting 1.8, $600,000 more, that seems significantly greater than what you need, and I would ask you to evaluate the need for that, and keep it around the 10% or less. So we'll move on to board services.
Board services budget includes all director-related items. Due to increases in cost and wages, the budget for director labor, director benefits, car allowance, communication allowance, cars and increased slightly, and director's travel and legislative travel budgets have remained the same. The biggest increase we have is the election expense of $800,000, as estimated by the county, for that including the November ballot. Selection of directors for division 3 and 5. And the sponsorship budget for community outreach has also remained the same. And then we'll pause for any questions.
Any questions on this item? Okay, it's unfortunate that the county should have charged us $800,000 to conduct the election, but, on that, we don't have a choice. If I subtract that out of the 1.5 million, we're still at $700,000 budgeted versus the $442,000 that we're spending this year. So again, about a $250,000 increase, which is almost 50% of where we're at, or over 50% of where we're at. So again, same comment.
Due to retirement costs going up and benefit costs that we can.
District overhead, other costs.
will take the lead on page 45. Thank you. So here, there's nothing really highlighted in red because there's nothing that we've changed from the previous year, but I do have a few things I want to highlight, especially is insurance. As Susanna mentioned earlier, insurance is just going up overall. Our budget was $145,200. Our projection is about $191,700. So we did propose a slight increase. Just to let you know that we saw not overall an increase in insurance expense, but we were required to purchase cybersecurity insurance and crime insurance this past year. Also, we will
We
talk.
purchased crime insurance?
Yes.
Huh, I'll find out about that.
I was like, I don't know, who can. We'll talk about membership in the following slides afterwards. The other thing I do want to point out here is our office administration. You probably did see that go up from our adopted and a proposed and overall our projections. I do want to point out here that this is where the cost went up is for our document records management. We do send our documents off-site. Every time we do seek any documents to be retrieved, there is a cost incurred. We do send our documents off-site, but however, we don't destroy as much as we send off-site. So that's to let you know there's a cost for that overall. So if we can actually go to slide 29.
Oh, before you leave, slide 45, I did want to point out, you'll see that, I did remove the $15,000 there for the manager plan. The reason for that is that, last year, the board set aside $30,000 for, board, development of a strategic plan. When that was approved last year, we had, three, scope of work and, cost projections from, potential, consultants to assist us in that. And all three of those exceeded the $30,000 that we budgeted for. What I would, and you'll see it later in this presentation, I have recommended a budget for the board to prepare a strategic plan. I anticipate that all of the managers will be involved in that process. So what I've done is I've joined those two budgets to allow us to have the facilitator assist us in that. So that $15,000 is not a savings. I just added that to another department or another budget.
Slide 46. So this is a list of the chambers of commerce that West Basin is part of. We are proposing a new one. It's the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce at a request of the director. So our increase overall for this portion of the Chamber of Commerce is the $450,000. If we can move on to slide 47, it's the rest of the memberships that West Basin is part of. We did increase the proposed budget based on what we experienced in actual for a lot of these memberships. So we want to make sure we have adequate funds for all of these memberships proposed. Move on to the next slide. This is just to let you know, in our overhead budget, we do have $55,000 for district sponsorships, and this is just a reminder as of end of February, the ones that we have participated in this current fiscal year. Questions?
Any questions or comments on that? So my comment is pretty much similar to my last one, and just on a personal basis, I think everybody's aware of this anyway. I'm not quite sure that we need to be members of all of the organizations that we currently have here, but I'll leave it at that. And regarding the Chamber of Commerce, again, seems like an awful lot of Chamber of Commerce for us to be involved with, but why are we adding San Pedro?
I requested it.
I forbid we leave out a Chamber of Commerce.
I will
keep my comments to myself.
Yes. And again, the district sponsorships, we're members of these organizations, who we already pay a membership to. Then to give additional money for sponsorships, it seems to me, not the best use of our money, but, that's just my.
Can I ask them to go back to that slide that
Sure.
you're talking about? Put it back on the screen. Okay.
The sponsorships or the memberships?
The membership, that's what you're talking about, membership.
Yeah. Well,
Memberships, I'm sorry, membership. There you go.
okay,
Are
then,
these sponsorship, are these memberships, the board approved, or are they just in your budget? If they're approved in the budget and you just do?
Correct. You'll recall that in the past 2 years, the board has considered all of our current memberships. This is a pared back or a reduced number of memberships than we've had in the past. I think most recently we reduced it by about 5 or 6. But these are the memberships that we currently maintain.
and by approving the budget, we are approving all of these memberships.
So with West, we had an agreement of $10,000 for 3 years, so we completed that, is that why? There's no money that's put in that other line. You see where you have 10,000.
No, that's because it's not gonna go up.
There's no change.
Yeah.
But we're still committed to doing 10,000?
Correct.
Mhm.
Wasn't there agreement for 3 years, or just ongoing?
It's been a number of years. This is their annual fee.
But it was 3 years, maybe $30,000.
Yeah.
So this may be,
Is that a 3-year agreement, or is this,
it was 3 years. 3 years. 10,000 per year for 3 years.
so this is, so you've done 2 years, right?
I believe so.
So next budget cycle will be 10, and then it will be over unless we approve another agreement, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the same with, what about CalDESA, what does that mean when you, does it mean that we just continually?
There's no increase or decrease.
What now?
There's no increase or decrease.
Okay,
So we.
it stays the same like that. The same with the Southern California Water Coalition?
Correct. No increase here.
Remember when that was, $2,500?
I remember when it started, around. I was getting $25,000. Got that, right? You're on the.
That's the level that we're
I
at
remember
now.
when they just started.
Well, it's kind of morphed, it's become, it doesn't do anymore, doesn't do very much, except have monthly meetings,
Which I go to.
but,
Yeah.
it has a much more active, executive director, let's put it that way.
Yeah, he is.
Maybe you should come to our board meeting and tell us that.
I would, and a long time ago, I wanna move on, I could tell a
No,
long story
I don't wanna get nitpicky about all the organizations we're part of.
about that.
These are the fees.
So, let's
I'm
move
just
on.
asking questions,
Not you.
okay? That's all I'm doing. I'm not picking up any organization, so.
The good thing is most of them, the fee is staying the same. I mean, a few of them, a little bit goes up, one of them is going down, actually. We have pared this
Yeah.
this
What's
down
the water read?
considerably from what we used to
I want
give
to
fees
read.
out.
So
Okay.
any difference in what we've done last year and whatever that just reads there, that would be the following year, yeah? Because I'm looking at water reuse, was 15,000, then it went up to 17, so now it's 1,900 for next year. Okay.
Or 900 increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's good to know, to look at this information and to know what we do.
If there were any requests for additional memberships, we would bring that back to the board for a specific action. but these are our current memberships, and we would intend, or plan to, if approved by the board, to renew all of those agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Right, next one up is the, Donald L. D. Building.
And that's your packet page 49. Our adopted budget for fiscal year 23-24 was about $407,000. Our projections is about $386,315. Our proposed budget in fiscal year 24-25 would be about $401,550, which is a slight decrease overall. You do see that the very first line we want to talk about is utilities. Overall, we're expecting about 10% increase for our electricity and water, and about 6.8 to 13% increase for gas and trash collection. However, in our repairs and maintenance, we are going to complete our HVAC project that we did budget in fiscal year 23-24. Therefore, you don't see that expenditure proposed in the new one. Everything else does stay relatively the same with slight increases. It's actually relatively the same, and everything else that goes down a little bit based on our new agreement for janitorial and landscape. Pause here for questions. Now I'll move to my last slide.
Question about the repairs and maintenance. There's a decrease in your proposed, why is that?
So in our current fiscal year budget, we did plan to have our HVAC project to be completed, and so we don't have that expenditure in the new.
So that is, thank you.
Okay, we're done with that one. Next one is finance and procurement.
So in our current fiscal year budget, we did adopt $247,200, and our proposed is $235,300. While we acknowledge our projections are about $170,206, some of the things that you do see that we didn't spend as much as our financial advisors and our bond counsel, and we really only tap into them if we need their assistance for any special analysis if we're still out for credit rating. And so we did not have those costs incurred this year, therefore our projections are a little bit lower. We do want to maintain that level in case for this upcoming fiscal year, because we do see that we have a $30 million credit line that is going to be needed with their assistance. And another item we want to point out is the software license. We did spend about $6,800, while we did budget $30, and we're trying to maintain that same $30. We do have this one special license that for some reason they haven't charged us this past year, and we don't know if they're going to charge us in the upcoming year, but it is for our procurement team, is our requisition center. They are sunsetting their overall support for North America, but we do have one more year with them. The IT department is working on utilizing our existing ERP system to build it out for their fiscal year 25-26. Pause here for any questions.
There are no questions. We will move on to the last item, which is human resources.
Good afternoon, to the board and the members of the board. I am presenting the HR section. As far as the projections for fiscal year 23-24, there is a correction. That is actually under the actual projection. The projection is more of $100,000 for this fiscal year. So with that said, the proposed budget for 24-25 is $2,450. The biggest difference is the DEI consultant and the class and comp consultant. We did take advantage of the DEI consultants this year. The only amount of money we are going to use for a DEI, towards the DEI initiative, is a guest speaker coming in June, so that wasn't accounted for in the projection. And moving forward to next fiscal year, our intent is to seek a consultant in regards to a DEIA strategy. We already have an in-house committee of staff that participate in a DEI strategic plan, And, we would like to push it forward and have assistance with the consultants to guide us through that, strategic plan that we set forth. As far as the class and comp, we're, asking for $50,000. Usually class and comps are done within 2 to 4 years. We're already 6 years out from the last one that we, completed back in 2018. Back in 2018, it was about $35,000 to $40,000. The anticipation for the 50 is just an increase in cost. But it is needed. We do have, positions that are miscategorized, and we just want to make sure that we are competitive with the industry as well. So, that are the two biggest costs. As far as the, variances, I have decreased the training, because the plan for HR is to bring more training in-house opposed to using outside consultants or speakers. The legal cost is just, a decrease again. The money is just, kind of a hold just for employee situations that may arise. You never know what happens in any type of, environment, working environment, so we always put some type of hold on, legal fees. And, if you notice, there is a big difference in the employee recognition from the projected to the proposed. One of them, again, the total cost, because we just had our employee luncheon, was not accounted for. And moving forward for next year, we are, anticipating purchasing more shirts and jackets for staff. We are low, and since we are doing much more, outreach, it is always anticipated for, staff to wear, logo shirts, promo shirts. And then, I also added for the HR budget, career fairs. We are doing a big push, this fiscal year in, participating in college career fairs. Some cost money, some don't, so we just put an anticipated amount. Our goal is to participate in as many, career fairs as possible to promote the water industry and the, district itself. If, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to start.
Yeah, I did want to add, one thing. In relation to the DEI and A, I wanted to let the board know that in working with the Human Resources Department, I have implemented a new mandatory training on DEI and A, that'll take place annually. Obviously, it's hard to get all of our employees in one room at the same time, so if people are unable to attend, there will be a makeup opportunity, but everybody will attend those. In relation to the class and comp study, I know that this was discussed in last year's budget. Obviously, as far as DEI and A, we look at it as recruiting and then also retaining. And so, the class and comp study is highly recommended. It's been a part of every one of West Basin's strategic plans in years past. And unfortunately, due to a number of different reasons, we haven't done one since 2018. But I wanted to highlight this because I know it's come up in relation to the overhead and labor across the board. One of the things that I've discussed with most of you individually is that I intend to come below our budget. We'll continue to analyze every single position and every single need of the district, but the class and comp study is crucial if we're going to continue to do that in the future. And last but not least, Elisa did mention the logo shirts and hats and such like that. I'm very proud of the fact that our staff has attended and participated in far more outreach events than ever before, but it is hot outside. And so I can no longer wear the collared shirt and tie out there, and unfortunately, my head needs a hat. And so we do need to provide that. We want our staff out there. They're volunteering for the most part out there. We do talk about it being part of different jobs here at West Basin, but we want to continue to be out there in our community. We want everybody to be identified with a beautiful West Basin logo, and so that is the rationale for that.
Yes.
Every category you talked about, totally support. You know, the employees are out there. Not only does it help with, you know, being cool and everything in terms of the weather, but it really is an advertisement for us, people feel, right? And so, I mean, I think that's great that you guys do that. The E&I, thank you for mandating a training for all of us. And to know that it's yearly, I really commend you for that. I think that's very important. As a comp study, I think I've heard it should happen every 5 years. And if it was done in 2018, it's faster. So I just want to comment on that. Thank you.
Yes, Director Houston.
Well, first of all, our general manager, this is the way you should dress when you go to events, all the time. Tie with the logo, the lanyard on, but anyway. I agree with what you said there. I just want to understand two things, recruitment costs, which, you know, we actually spent more than what you anticipated, but you're also holding it similar to what it was, but what exactly are the recruitment costs?
That's advertising.
Okay.
And our advertising costs have gone extremely high due to the DEI initiative.
Let me take the blunt for that. Well, Alyssa and I can show you that. But, you know, when I think of DEI&A, and I think about diversity in the workforce, I've mentioned this to a lot of you, I think about it in two different categories. One is the outreach and marketing of every position.
Right.
We're trying to find people that may not know about it. We're trying to find people that may not live here in California at this time. And Elisa has done an amazing job of finding different opportunities to market our positions. We bring in a diverse applicant pool, and that's the biggest, I think, the most important part of attaining our diversity in the workforce. So yes, we have looked at our budget and tried to find funds to go out there and market that. Every position, Elisa's tired of me asking, but every time we market a position, I would say, well, where did we advertise that? And so we're looking at that, and of course, we're analyzing exactly which of those investments and marketing tools is being fruitful. So we'll continue to edit that and work on that. But ultimately, we're trying to find out what works to recruit people to our business.
That's why on that one, I was thinking, I mean, if this is the number you're at right now, maybe that's something in the proposed budget that actually needs to go up. I don't know, but
The only reason it's slightly high is he quite
the position, oh, okay.
there was more turnover last year, and knock on wood, I don't anticipate that
Okay.
many this year, so hence that's why the budget is
No
a
worries.
little
And I-
lower.
And that's why, and this one I wasn't even knocking, I was just wondering why it did go up so much, relative to what you thought it was gonna be, and then you're saying, well, I don't really need it necessarily for next time, and, you know, somebody did recently ask me, you know, how much we were outreaching and this, that, and the other. It was just a good question, because, you know, we're talking about workforce development, and we're talking about trying to really search to find folks to look at, the agency and the industry. So literally someone did ask me that question the other day, like, well, what are you actually doing? And I'm like, our folks are at almost every career fair and all these other options they can do. So just know that, you know, people are asking, and so you obviously, the numbers reflecting you're doing it. The other thing on the career fairs, so I fully understand as well, you're putting some money into that. I mean, it's a small amount, $2,500, but what is that covered? Are there fees to be at the career fair? Is that
Some
what?
of them, there are registration fees for
Okay.
some of them, and then there are others that are basically free and be part of the fair. So I just put a kind of arbitrary number in there, just in anticipation if we do get charged for a registration fee, that there is some money in there that we can utilize towards that.
I see. Perfect, thank you.
Yes, Director Ray.
President and board and everyone, I have to leave, so thank you for all your presentations today, and thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to leave, I have another.
And Director Gray, before you leave, I did want to mention, as I'll be mentioning to all the board, if you would like a one-on-one to go through materials, as with any of the future workshops, you let us know, and I could be there, but I can also bring two people.
Okay, so before we move on, I think we have gone through all of the expenditures now. With respect to the last item, you mentioned about buying new, workforce attire. So two comments on that. please buy all natural fabrics. I think it would, be better. You were talking about being hot, polyester is more, be too hotter than cotton would. And it does, and if you buy natural fibers, you're not using, petrochemical. So that'd be a good thing. Second is, when we did have the employee, luncheon, there were goodie bags in the board all got goodies, which included a, blanket. And, thank you for the blanket, and I noticed it was 100% cotton, which is a natural fabric. And that's all to the good. To the bad was, it was made in, Peru, I think, and we're trying to buy American. There is good Pima cotton, grown in the United States, and there are, manufacturers, of blankets in the United States. So I don't know why we bought, foreign-made goods on something that, as simple as that. That was not a complicated one. That was not one that, we really had to stretch. I think that we just weren't paying attention. So in buying the attire for the staff, let's make sure we buy American, and there are a lot of, American apparel manufacturers, and, there are a lot of American apparel manufacturers that manufacture apparel with natural fabric.
No.
Okay, the last item, and Ken, I think I hinted at this. I've tracked, all of the, expenditures for every category. So if we look at what we're going to spend this year, in summation, we're gonna spend $65,390,000. Now, that may go up a little or down a little when you do the final. It's a projection through the end of the fiscal year. And it may not come right on that, but it'll come close to that 65 million. If you increased our budget by 10%, which is a big increase, the city of Los Angeles is gonna have to decrease their budget, by a significant amount. Our budget should only, our expenditure for next year should only be around $71,900,000, let's say $72 million. That's a 10% increase. Now, arguably, some areas are gonna go up a little bit more, but, I would challenge you that we should live within a 5% increase. And that is, I think, within what we've, committed to increase our salaries. For, salaries, we're at a 5%, and that's about a reasonable increase for, annual adjustment. So we're looking at a budget that's significantly greater than that. I'm not very supportive of that. I think that the overall expenditure should be around that $72 million. And the number that we have in front of us, if we add it, is significantly greater than that. It's in the 90 million. $72 million, that's 10% increase over current expenditure. That's a big number. Okay, so the next part of our workshop today is the revenues.
Yeah, so please turn to page 53. So the largest, the White Basin revenue is from, recycling water sales, which is around $51 million. You can see from the first line. The second largest revenue is from a White Basin reliability service charge, which is in the second line, ranging from 22 million to 26 million. The reliability service charge is calculated based on the total potable water sales multiply the base rate of our reliability service charge. As you can see from the last row on page 53, White Basin's total revenue will depending on which option for the decided on. So now please turn to page 54. White Basin's portable tier 1 rate is calculated based on West Basin's Tier 1 rate plus metropolitan Tier 1 rate plus metropolitan's RTS plus West Basin reliability service charge. Again, this is, depends on the boarding station, how much increase we want to be putting down for the reliability service. I'll move on to page 55. The recycling water rate, we also presenting, more options here. West Basin's recycling irrigation water rate is also depends on for the station, how much the increase is going to be for the reliability service charge. Please turn to page 56. On our current water bill, here the rate applied to recycling irrigation, Chevron nitrified, and Torrance low pressure water. Staff reviewed current existing agreement. I recommend tier rate should not be applied to recycle the irrigation within West Basin service area. Tier rate should not be applied to Chevron nitrified and Torrance low pressure. Tier rate should only apply by the contract, which is the only one we have right now is with LADW. Staff recommend to correcting the tier rate in fiscal year 25. This change will increase West Basin recycling water revenue by $135,000. Please turn to page 57. One of the charges West Basin will put on customers' monthly water bill is the fixed service charge, which is the total cost from a public information and then water policy department. The total cost is from those two departments is $7.2 million. And then we allocated the cost to our customer agency based on the 3-year portable water sales average. Now please turn to page 58. For the standby revenue, West Basin will receiving $5.7 million in fiscal year 25. This revenue will go away in fiscal year 31, 7 years from today. Please turn to page 59. West Basin expected to receiving $4.8 million grant in fiscal year 2025. There are $2.1 million from state water resources for PD lateral, additional $2 million from the Department of Water Resources, also from PD lateral. And then we have a couple $1,000 from the rock replacement project and then our joint project with Last Merchant. Please turn to page 60. West Basin also expected to receive $297,000 from Metropolitan for water harvest and the other conservation programs. And next slide. We do have other revenue coming in. One of the revenue is going to be the investment income. Currently, we have a cash reserve of $69 million, and the expected rate of return for next year is 3.8%. So that's roughly $2.5 million. based on the current agreement with the Torrance, they are reimbursed, some of the OM costs. So we are projecting 2 months receivable from that current existing contract, that's $198,000. And then the third one, which is very minimum, basically, we providing service for City of Inglewood and Manhattan Beach. And then they reimburse the laboratory costs that we're spending for them. Next slide. West Basin expected to receiving the $4.1 million from a refinery. These are based on the existing terms of those agreements. And next slide. There's also $2.8 million we will be collecting through monthly water billing. These are we just collecting this for Metropolitan Water District. These are not the West Basin revenues. I will pause to see if you have any questions about any revenue. Okay, so I'll move on to page 64. This will be the last session of the presentation. So please turn to page 65. You're at right now. The purpose of the budget is to calculating the total expense, estimate the total potable and the recycling water sales, and use some of the assumptions to balance the revenue and the expenses. The board asked us to use 80,000 acre feet as the potable water sales and 1,800 acre feet as the sales to Dominguez Gap. We reduced $2.5 million from the 72 million expenses in April 6th to 69 million today. There are 4 options on page 66 for the board to consider. I will ask EJ to walk you through.
Yes, and this is, in relation to what we provided you, at the first workshop. And what we're looking at right now is just those, 4 different options for you to consider. Option 1 is a 0% increase. Option 2 is a 5%. Option 3 is a 10%. And option 4 is 15%. You'll recall last, budget workshop, we did have a pretty lengthy discussion in relation to the debt coverage ratio. My recommendation would be that we try to stick or land at a 1.5. I do recognize that our contractual obligation is to be at a 1.2. Clearly, you'll want to budget above the 1.2 in case anything drastic were to happen, because you could not or should not go below that 1.2. But I would argue that the 1.5 allows West Basin to begin to recover as far as our reserves go. The board has been very clear that whenever and wherever possible, it would be desired to not utilize debt to fund programs and projects. And as such, we need to have a healthy reserve. So you can see here that with those 4 options, you see the total expenses there. As Winnie mentioned earlier in the presentation, since our last presentation to you all, we have gone through that budget that was proposed, and we've reduced $2.56 million. You can see there what that would look like as far as the debt coverage ratio. And again, you can look at the reliability service charge increase depending upon the option there. I've also had, when you include, this is a new category that was not included in the previous presentations. You can see at the very bottom, that last section, is expense reduction required to meet that debt coverage of 1.5. So if you were to choose, say, option 3, we would need to reduce our proposed budget by an additional $3.2 million in order to achieve that 1.5 ratio. Now, retailers to discuss, not just our budget, but also our proposed, rate increase. So far, each and every one of them have stated that they expect our rates to increase. I've discussed the different components of, our rate increases, and of course, our rate as a total. And I wanted to point something out, that maybe if you're not involved with Metropolitan Water District, maybe you're not as familiar with. But, Metropolitan Water District charges an RTS, a readiness to serve, component on their, rate. I believe in the next fiscal year, ours is approximately $14 million. Of the 26 member agencies, 23 of those member agencies assess that on their property tax. So they don't touch it, it gets collected and delivered to Metropolitan Water. West Basin is one of 3 member agencies that charges RTS on the volumetric rate. So I hear this all the time, people talk about rate increases and where West Basin's rates are. And I've been discussing this with our refineries and our customer agencies. If you look at our rates, you could say that they are higher, but it is not an apples to apples comparison. Charging that on the volumetric rate, does stand out. I've actually discussed removing it, making it a fixed charge, because it's hard to collect it and be accurate. You're either gonna under collect or you're gonna over collect. And so I've discussed this with the board president as far as different things go. But I wanted to point that out because, again, if you're not that familiar with Metropolitan Water District and the fact that 23 member agencies do this on the property tax, you know, that is a significant difference. I've actually asked staff to consult with Met to see if we could change our mind after all these years, but unfortunately. So I wanted to point that out, something that we looked at. Again, you look at the 10%. That right now would be my recommendation, but I do know that we have a lot more information that we need to provide you. I do recognize that we need to work towards sharpening the pencil and reducing our costs. And then lastly, I would just point out that the conversations that we're having on the staff end is that we need to be conservative in our projected sales and conservative in our projected expenses. And the reason is because West Basin and the entire water industry has been through a lot over the last several years. When there's an upset at Hyperion or anything like that, we see our costs go significantly higher. Obviously, we've made it through COVID, but we've learned a lot as far as that emergency goes. And so that is the budget that you have before you, our conservative approach to that. But I promise you this, we're going to continue to refine things and look at them. Take note of all of the comments that we've heard today, and so we'll go back and we'll make some adjustments as well. But that would be my discussion on this slide. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Go ahead. If you need.
Federal manager, you've given us options. 0, 5, 10, 15%. Of course, this board could pick any percentage, not just those 4 choices.
That is correct.
And that's nice to have all these options where we can, we're aware we can do that. What I want to know is, what is your recommendation to this board? What is the staff's recommendation to this board regarding any increases we may make this year?
My recommendation at this time is option 3, and I want to let the board know why. I find that this is in line with what the industry is moving towards, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, because this is not what the president was saying, but he referred to the 10% increase, and that being generous. Expenses are going up significantly. As Adele mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to attend a meeting with, I think it was 22 of the 26 member agencies on Thursday. We had a very in-depth discussion about this, because I want to see what other agencies are doing. The most important thing that I can relay back to you is that there's no agency alike. Every agency is different. They all have very different things. Some charge on sewer, and some charge on water, some have water. It's across the board. But I think that looking at that, for this time, yes, we need to sharpen our pencil, yes, we need to reduce our costs. But the most important thing is that we plan for the future. And if you think about, the increases, we're suffering through a downfall in revenue because of decrease in sales, which is the direction of the board. We've pushed conservation, we've done everything we can, and our communities have responded. And then secondly, if you were to go back 10 years ago, nobody would have saw, the negotiation and the settlement on the standby charge. That's almost $5 million right there. And then lastly, we've had some issues in related to, I mentioned RTS. Last year, we under-collected about $2 million. And so we're working through all those things. Our next workshop will be focused more on the water recycling program. And you'll get to learn a little bit more about where we are in the process study. Because yes, we need to see, revenue from our recycled water program. But right now, my recommendation, and I know it's a very tough decision, is the option 3.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, number one, I would not say I would be ready at all today to make any decision. And even respectfully listening to what you just said, I would not be in any place to make a decision today. I think we did actually look at a lot of things that you need to go back. I think there's a number of areas you could adjust and tweak something. Because, again, we had this adopted budget that we're currently in for this fiscal year. We have not been spending as much in a lot of areas as we anticipated, so I do think you could be more conservative, quite frankly, for the next fiscal year. And this does not take that into account. And then the other thing is, because you have the debt coverage ratio, so even on, let's say, option 3, you're coming in at what, 1.36 with the numbers that were built into this whole presentation, right, EJ?
That is correct.
Obviously, you said if we wanted to hit 1.5, you've got to go down to the bottom and cut even more to get to that number, to make it a 1.5, right?
Correct.
So, again, back to my point, I think we need to see you all go back, based on comments today, really trim it up some more realistically in your different departments. Because I think you can already find some areas that will make the numbers come out better, quite frankly. And again, I'm still not sold. I mean, maybe, other people can eventually opine, but, is 1.5 the magic number? I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm still open-minded to that. But anyway, I look forward to hearing what you all come back with on the next cycle, just to see based on what happened today.
Thank you.
I agree that it's probably premature to make a decision today. No question about it.
I agree, also. I didn't expect that we would make a decision. I don't think we expected us to.
We have 2 more budget workshops.
Yes, correct.
There's no other comments. I agree with, Director Houston's comments and, the other comments. I'm not in a position to make any decision today. I would like to address or request a couple of things. And I'd like to see this come back. I was tracking actual expenditures, now, what was budgeted or what is proposed to be budgeted. So I would like to see a tabulation of actual, and then if we just increase our budget, our proposed budget by going 10% over. Maybe you want to say on any one program, I need more, but if I look at the bottom line, add everything up, 10% over current expenditures is a lot of money. So you can come in and say, well, this one item, like for example, on the, board, item of, having to pay for the election of $800,000 is really not a choice. But $800,000, when you look at the overall budget, would probably be one area where you go way over, but you got others that would go under. 10% increase over existing, I think is more than, I think come in much higher, to come in higher than that, which is where you're at today if we adopted the proposed budget, would be, in my opinion, not supportive. So I'd like to see those numbers, okay? Regarding the, need for a debt coverage ratio, if you ever talk to an investment banker or any financial advisor, they're always gonna tell you they need to see more money. And I would tell you that if you're just planning on your own finances, your savings should be maximized. And that you should have as much money available because something could happen tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean that we are gonna be at a disadvantage if we have less than 1.5 debt coverage ratio, if we need to go out and get future financing, et cetera. So yes, any professional that I pay for advice was always going to take the conservative approach and tell me I need more, but I'm not necessarily at the point where I have to have it. What I have to have is enough to meet my legal obligations, and that's 1.25. So that's where I'm at in terms of the debt coverage ratio, which goes to basically reserves. Then the other thing that I would like to see is when we come back, if we're going to need to look at this a couple more times, is kind of where I was earlier, a breakdown, but let's put it in terms of what is the cost of water. So let's have a table, pretty much like the table that we end up, that we don't see till we adopt the budget, and that's our water rates and schedule. And what we see, here's what we're gonna be charging, because what we need to add in there, now there's no change this year, but effective January 1, 2025, the MET rate will go up. The Tier 1 rate will go up 11%. All right, so that water will now be $1,300 and some odd dollars, and that will be the basis. So let's come back with a table that says, here's what it is currently, what it will be July 1 when we adopt our budget, but what it's gonna be to January 1st, 25, because that's when we have to pass through the MET rate. And that's gonna affect the overall increase in the cost of water.
And Director Alvarez, just for everybody, you don't have to go back and look at it now, but if you, after today, if you go back to packet page 54, we tried to do that and show the different options, and it shows the list of community pass-throughs, as well as what it would look like with our.
What page is it?
It's, packet page 50. I understand what your point is, let's look at the different components and stuff like that. Just, we can go back and look at that,
Okay. All right, so I'd like to see that a little bit. Go ahead, Director Leo.
Obviously, we're going to go on next time, but we need to start thinking about the areas of saving money. Staff's doing that, going to be doing that. It seems to me that we're very generous in a lot of our grants, monies, organizations, memberships. Are they all that necessary? I think not. I think we've been very generous. But if we really have to tighten the belt, there's an area we need to look at.
Amen to that?
Well, I'll opine only in defense that, to be honest, I mean, we have, our sponsorship budget, it's not that much. I mean,
It's not that much, you're right.
$75,000 for the whole year from 5 different divisions. You know, I mean, that's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things. And also, and even the 55,000 as a district sponsorship, which kind of covers, you know, different types of, events. So I totally understand.
And add to that the membership.
Well, I understand that, but you know, the memberships don't pay for some of those other events.
It's not the only answer at
No,
the beginning.
No, and I'm not even arguing with you that, because I think, you know, you could definitely look sometimes at some of the memberships, although even looking at that current roster, we really have leaned it up. What I would say is if we have some of the memberships, especially the water association related ones, is that we're taking as much advantage of the memberships as possible. You know, whether it's like SoCal Water Coalition and or especially the ones that are professional for our staff. But back to kind of going from their point, Director Gear, is, again, staff, I think, has done a pretty good job overall, not spending as much money this last fiscal year as we actually authorized. And some of that stuff is out of your control too, though, because, you know, you anticipate something's gonna happen and it didn't. So, you know, you didn't have that expenditure, some other areas. So that's why I think you can look through this and they can find some of the savings that, quite frankly, are not really even hurting per se, because you probably were overestimated to begin with on some things.
I didn't read it, well, I see, when they take a look at it, look at the whole budget. Big job, I guess.
The last item, I think the most critical item, one that at least has been, something that I've harped on for a while, the cost of service study. Because when we look at recycled water rate, set recycled water rate, we need to know what our costs are. And we should be setting those recycled water rates, basically to recover those costs. The cost of service study needs to be finalized, and that needs to be brought back when we look at recycled water.
Yes, I'm pleased to say that I've seen some significant improvement. Again, I want to give our staff a lot of credit for really working with our consultants. The latest draft that I saw, made me feel pretty good that we're getting close. But, and I know that you and I have had a chance to discuss this specifically, but at this time, the majority of our recycled water sales are contractually to a specific rate. There's really only one water quality that is not, and that's our Title 22, our irrigation. And that is, and of course, this is a discussion that we need to have, is the policy of where you want to price that, because it needs to be somewhat comparable to imported water or potable water, because the majority of the users of that are cities and our school districts. So, but I'm very pleased to say that we're getting close. I will schedule individual meetings with each of you to talk a little bit about where we are with that. And get our back.
So, given that, we still need to know what our costs are in order to be able to set them, but we definitely need that cost of service study finalized. What are the costs for the different waters that we're producing? And yes, there are contractual requirements, we need to revisit those contracts, and some of those contracts are coming up and are gonna be more easily revised than others, but in all cases, all of the contracts are gonna have to be, or discussions are gonna be, have to be held with all, regarding all of the contracts. Yes, sir.
Okay, so before we kind of wrap it up, I guess, I just had a couple of thoughts. So I do also want to reiterate, and I think Director President Alvarez said this probably better than I did, but that's what I was getting at. This debt coverage ratio, you know, I think that we should always focus on what is our legal obligation rather than some magic number that someone's telling us we should be at. I really do believe that. Because, you know, we may be able to just do what we need to do with realistic numbers and hit something that keeps us secure rather than we need to be at, say, 1.5. So I'm more in that camp, DJ. I think as long as we are meeting the minimum requirements of what we gotta do, then I think that's the way we should approach it personally. And once again, I've also seen where, especially cities, you know, some people believe in having a huge reserve fund, but then that money is just sitting there, and it's not being used for things in the city or the jurisdiction, and that's what I don't want to see. I want to see us have a good backup for, you know, whatever it is, 2 months, 3 months, whatever we decide, but, you know, let's not just hoard money to hoard it, right? We need to make sure the money is doing what it needs to do in the district. Obviously, if push came to shove, we can borrow again, we can do certain things, and we actually had to, right? So that's just a thought, but I'm not wedded to, what we have been continuing to talk about yet, okay? You didn't say it in the presentation, but I'm assuming we're still going to give the $1 per square foot on the grass rebate. Was that built into the numbers today?
Yeah, we would go up until that grant max.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was also mentioned, and I know it's a challenge, so, when times are drier, some of our recycled water customers are not using the recycled water outdoors, I understand, right? And I know that's a difficult one. I don't know how we continue to ask them or entice them to keep using that water. But I think that's something we should work on, especially if we end up having a drier coming summer and winter. Because look, this is, you know, one of the great services of recycled water is you can utilize that water across the system outdoors. So to the best of our ability, I think we need to somehow diplomatically encourage those users to use that water, and not be afraid to use that water, right? And then, and this goes back to, and I think, you know, again, President Alvarez, my concern is if we overestimate like the budget, then that does translate directly into the water rate increases, and that's why I think it's really important. We're very conservative, we really nip and tuck and trim, because whatever we finally authorize, that gets translated into the numbers that become the water rates. And so I think that's why it's very important that you all go back in there and look at that. And then when we pass the increase on, it's extremely judicious, and it's going to go to work in the district rather than, you know, we thought it was gonna be this high, and we just over anticipated. That's my perspective. And I don't know, we're gonna have comments at the end, right? Because I have a separate comment at the
Yeah,
end of the
we
meeting.
should have
Okay,
the,
cool.
director's comment.
Great, okay. So that's all on this for me, but I look forward to the next one. I think you all have done a good job, and I applaud you. You really went in and did a lot of what we asked, and we're getting much closer to, I think, where we need to be, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, if there's no other comments, we're done with the budget workshop. We do not have a closed session, so the next item up is director's comments, and I'll start out with you, Director Deere. Do you have any director's comments?
I just want to compliment the staff for doing a fine job as they usually do, and, everything's very clear to us. And, you know, by next meeting, you have all our problems solved.
I echo.
Sure. So I echo as well, and thank you, and thank you. This was much longer than I think we all anticipated, although it was good, but I want to say thank you for your time on Saturday, much appreciated. And the one thought I had, which I've told the general manager this before, I would love us to look at a way to have a volunteer engagement program at West Basin and or an ambassador program, whatever you want to call it. I know that the COG does that, but I've had a number of people who've asked, how can I get involved with the district? So we have some folks who would love to help us in some way, shape, or form, and I really would like the staff to look at a program where if people want to participate, we can plug them in, which also may help some of the staff time issues as well. So maybe that's also something that helps our bottom line a little bit too. But, again, EJ, there's been a consistent number of folks who've asked, and I don't want to just send them down to the COG and plug them in there. I think we could develop something here where they could help out, whether it's the plant or in the outreach or, you know, the office in some way, shape, or form, because there's folks who really want to assist the water district. So I would like you all to please look at that, and then you can think about that as part of your bigger budget process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Besides the comments I already made, I asked for some of the comments that came from the other board members. And, thank you, everyone, for bringing in most of the, line items under the current, budget. That's, very commendable. I just wanted to see that continue. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
I like-